Sold to the Don, the 19-year-old bride who became his queen. The moment her father's hand let go of hers in that marble foyer, Lena Hayes understood something no 19-year-old should ever have to learn. She had not been brought to Italy to save him. She was the payment. A man twice her age stood at the top of the staircase, calm as winter, watching her the way a collector watches something rare finally delivered. No screaming, no chains, just a signature, a ring, and a door that locked from the outside. If you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop a like and tell me in the comments what city you're tuning in from. I want to see how far Lena's story travels. Stay with me until the very end. You won't believe what this girl becomes. The plane tilted into its descent over the Tuscan hills, and Lena Hayes pressed her forehead against the small oval window until the cold of it ached through her skin. Below her, the land looked like something out of a postcard her mother used to keep on the refrigerator back when her mother was still alive to keep anything. Red rooftops, cypress trees in tight dark lines, a river somewhere glinting like a dropped knife. She had never been out of the country before. She had barely been out of Ohio. "You're gonna love it, kiddo," her father said from the seat beside her, already on his third little bottle of bourbon from the drink cart. His tie was loose, his collar was damp. He had been sweating since they boarded in Newark, and Lena had pretended not to notice because pretending not to notice things about her father had become the full-time job of her life. Italy. Real Italy. Not that Olive Garden crap. "Dad, I'm just saying. You said that already twice." He laughed too loud, the way he laughed when he was nervous and trying to cover it with volume. A woman across the aisle glanced over and then glanced away. The quick, polite flinch Americans give each other in public. Lena felt heat crawl up her neck. "Relax," her father said. "We're almost there. We land. We meet the guy. We sign the paperwork. We're back home by the weekend. You'll have a story to tell at school." "I'm not in school anymore, Dad." "Community college is school. I dropped out in February. I told you." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a second she saw something flicker behind his red-rimmed eyes. Something that almost looked like grief. Or maybe just the recognition that he had missed another thing. Then it was gone, covered up with the same grin he used on bartenders and bail bondsmen. "Right," he said. "Right, sorry, sweetheart. Head's been a mess." Lena didn't answer. She went back to the window. She was 19 years old. She had $840 in her checking account, a duffel bag in the overhead bin, and a passport that had been issued 3 weeks ago in a strip mall in Columbus. Her father had told her the trip was about a business opportunity. Something about real estate. Something about a partner in Florence who needed an American face on some documents. He had promised her $10,000 for 2 days of work. $10,000 was a lot of money when you were 19 and your rent was due and your mother was 3 years in the ground and your father had already pawned your grandmother's ring twice to get it back once. She should have known. Some part of her, the part that lived underneath all the other parts, had known. She had known it when he picked her up from her apartment in a rented Cadillac he couldn't afford. She had known it when he wouldn't tell her the name of the man they were meeting. She had known it when he hugged her at the gate in Newark and held on a second too long and whispered, "I'm sorry, kiddo," into her hair before she could ask what for. But she had gotten on the plane anyway, because he was her father. Because you don't stop believing your own father, not really, not even when you should. Not even when every single thing he has ever told you has turned out to be the soft version of something harder. The wheels kissed the runway. Lena's stomach dropped. A black car was waiting outside baggage claim. Not a taxi. Not an Uber. A car. Long and polished and serious, the kind of car that made people glance twice and then look away fast. The driver was a man in his 40s with a shaved head and a jaw like a brick, and when he saw Lena's father, he did not smile. "Mr. Hayes." Hey, yeah, that's me. This is my daughter, Lena. Lena, say hi." "Hi," Lena said. The driver did not say hi back. He opened the rear door. He looked at Lena's duffel bag like it had personally offended him, then picked it up with one hand and put it in the trunk. Her father climbed in first. Lena stood on the curb for one extra second, and the Italian afternoon sat on her shoulders like a warm, wet coat, and she thought, very clearly, "Don't get in that car." She got in the car, because what else was she going to do? Stand in the airport, call who? With what phone? She didn't even have a working international plan. Her mother was dead. Her father was already buckling his seatbelt. There was nobody in the world, at that exact moment, whose job it was to notice whether Lena Hayes got into a car in Florence or not. The driver pulled away from the curb without a word. They drove for almost 2 hours. The city fell away first, then the suburbs of the suburbs. The road narrowed and climbed, olive trees on both sides, stone walls mossy at the base, a village that was gone before she could read the sign. Her father kept trying to make conversation. "Isn't this something? Look at those hills. Remember when we took you to Cedar Point?" And Lena kept answering in single syllables because her throat had started to close up an hour ago, and she could not make it open again. "Dad," she finally said, "where are we going?" "I told you, to meet the partner." "In the middle of nowhere?" "He's got a big place. Old money. Old money. Wait till you see it." "Dad." "What?" "Look at me." He didn't. "Look at me," she said again, and something in her voice must have been different, because he did. His eyes were glassy. His mouth was trembling a little at one corner, a small tic she had never seen on him before. He looked, she realized, exactly like a man being walked to something. "Daddy," she said, and the word came out smaller than she meant it. "What did you do?" "Nothing," he said. "Nothing, honey. It's fine." "What did you do?" The driver's eyes flicked up to the rearview mirror once, then down again. Her father swallowed. He reached out and took her hand, and his palm was wet. "It's just paperwork," he said. "That's all. Just paperwork. You sign a couple things, we go home, it's over. I promise you. I promise you, Lena." She pulled her hand back. She didn't say anything for the rest of the drive. The villa appeared the way certain buildings do in dreams, suddenly, and too big. 1 minute there was a long white gravel road between 2 rows of cypress, and the next minute the road opened into a courtyard, and the courtyard opened into a house that was not a house. It was a compound. Stone the color of old bone. 3 stories. Iron gates that had already closed behind them by the time Lena turned to look. A fountain in the center with a marble woman pouring water out of a jug, her face worn smooth by centuries. 2 men in dark suits stood at the front door. Not servants, not butlers. Something else. They watched the car roll to a stop with the flat, patient eyes of men who got paid to watch things. The driver killed the engine. "Out," he said. It was the first word he had spoken the entire drive. Lena's father fumbled with his seatbelt. His hands were shaking badly now. He couldn't get it unclipped. Lena leaned over and unclipped it for him, because that was the kind of thing you did, apparently, even when you had started to hate a person a little bit, even when you were afraid of them. "Lena," he whispered. "Lena, honey, listen. Whatever happens in there, just be polite, okay? Just be respectful. He's a very important man. He's been very understanding." "About what?" About the situation." "What situation, Dad?" "Out," the driver said again, louder. Her father got out. Lena got out. The air outside the car smelled like lavender and cut grass and something else, something faint and metallic that she couldn't place and didn't want to. Her duffel bag was set down on the gravel beside her. The trunk closed. The car did not leave. One of the men at the door spoke into a small radio clipped to his collar. The heavy wooden doors opened from the inside. "Come on," her father said, and his voice broke on the word. "Come on, kiddo. It's just a meeting." The inside of the villa was cold. Not the temperature, the feel of it. The marble floor swallowed the sound of their footsteps. The ceiling was so high it seemed to belong to a different building entirely. Oil paintings in gold frames watched them from the walls. Men on horses, women in long dresses, a pope, a saint, a hunting dog. The air smelled like beeswax and old stone. They were walked through a hall, then another hall, then into a room with tall windows and a fireplace taller than Lena and a long dining table that could have seated 20 and was set, right now, for 3. And at the head of the table, already seated, already waiting, was a man. He did not stand when they entered. He was maybe 45, maybe older. It was hard to tell. His hair was dark and cut short, graying cleanly at the temples. His face was narrow and very still. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie, the collar of his white shirt open at the throat, a heavy silver watch on his left wrist, a single plain ring on his right hand. He was drinking something amber out of a short crystal glass. And when Lena came into the room, he looked at her over the rim of it and did not look away. It was the most direct look she had ever received from another human being in her life. Not hungry, not angry, not any of the things she had been bracing for on the drive. Just seen, the way an appraiser looks at a thing before he quotes you the price. Lena felt her face go hot, and then cold, and then hot again. She forgot for a second how to walk. "Mr. Valenti," her father said, too loud, too fast. "Sir, thank you. Thank you for having us, for arranging, for—" "Sit down, Thomas." The voice was quiet, low, Italian underneath the English, but lightly, the way a shadow is underneath a floorboard. The man, Valenti, gestured to the two chairs on his right with one small movement of his fingers. It was not a request. Thomas Hayes sat down. He knocked over his water glass, reaching for the back of the chair. A serving woman appeared out of nowhere and cleaned it up without looking at any of them. Lena did not sit. Valenti's eyes moved to her and stayed there. "You must be Lena," he said. "Yes." "You are very tired from your travel." "Yes." "Please sit. Eat. We will talk after." "I'd rather talk now." The words were out of her mouth before she knew she was going to say them. Her father made a small noise in his throat, a strangled little "don't," and for a half-second Lena thought she had made a terrible mistake, that whatever rules this room ran on, she had just broken one. But Valenti didn't react. He didn't frown. He didn't smile either. He just looked at her for another long moment, and then he tilted his head very slightly, the way a man might tilt his head at an animal that had done something a fraction more interesting than he'd expected. "Very well," he said. "Thomas, leave us." What? "Sir, I don't think—" "Leave us." Her father looked at her. Lena looked back. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He stood up slowly, pushing the chair back with both hands like he needed them to keep him upright. And he walked out of the room without saying goodbye to her, without touching her shoulder, without anything. The door clicked shut behind him. There were now two people in the room, Lena and the man at the head of the table. She realized she was still standing. She realized her hands were shaking. She put them behind her back so he wouldn't see. "My name is Marco Valenti," he said. "Please, sit." She sat, not at the spot her father had been in, at the one across from it, further from him. He noticed. She could tell he noticed because the corner of his mouth moved, a half a millimeter, something that wasn't a smile but was paying attention. "Do you know why you are here, Lena?" "My father said it was about real estate." "Your father is a liar." He said it the way he might have said your father is left-handed. No heat, no judgment, just a fact, laid down on the table between them like a knife. "I know," she said. "Do you?" "Yeah, I do." "How long have you known?" "Long enough." He considered her. He took a slow sip from his glass. He set it down. "Your father owes a great deal of money," he said, "to me, and to some other people I speak for. The amount is more than he will earn in what remains of his life. More than he will earn in 2 of his lives, if we are being honest. He came to me 6 months ago. He asked for more time. I gave him more time. He came back 3 months ago. He asked for more time. I gave him more time. 2 weeks ago he came to me again, and this time he did not ask for more time. This time he offered me something else." Lena's mouth had gone dry. She could hear her own pulse in her ears, a high, fast ringing. "What?" she said. Marco Valenti looked at her. "You," he said. The room did a slow, sick rotation. She gripped the edge of the table. Her knuckles went white. She realized, about to throw up. She swallowed it down. She swallowed it down again. She was not going to throw up in front of this man. She was not going to cry in front of this man. She did not know why those two things felt suddenly more important than the words he had just said, but they did. They did. They did. "What does that mean?" she said, and her voice came out even, which surprised her. "What does that mean, you? What are you? What is he? What? A marriage. A what? A marriage, Lena, between you and me. No. I understand this is No." She was standing. She didn't remember standing. The chair had scraped back hard against the marble. Her whole body was vibrating. Some small detached part of her mind was noting, almost curiously, that this was the loudest she had ever spoken to an adult in her entire life. "No," she said again. "No. No, that's not a thing. That's not something people. I'm 19 years old. I'm an American. You can't just. My dad can't just. Sit down, Lena. I want to go home. Sit. Down." Still that same low, quiet voice. He had not raised it once. He had not stood up. He had not moved a muscle. And yet the room felt smaller somehow. The walls closer. The doors farther. She sat down. She was crying now. She couldn't help it. Two fat, hot tears rolling down her face, and she wiped them away furiously with the back of her hand, and more came. He watched her cry. He did not offer her a napkin. He did not offer her kind words. He just watched her with that same still terrible patience. And when she was finished, he spoke again. "You have been given bad information," he said, "about what is happening here. So I'm going to give you good information. Are you listening to me?" She nodded because she didn't trust her voice. "Your father is alive right now because of a decision I have not yet made. That decision will be made before the end of this week. If you leave this house tonight, he will not see Sunday. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" "You'd kill him." "I would not. Other men would. I would permit it." That's the same thing." "It is not. But I will not argue the point with you." He folded his hands on the table. The ring on his right hand caught the light. "I am not a young man, Lena. I am not a romantic. I did not look at your photograph and fall in love. Your father offered you to me as payment, and I accepted because the alternative was a great deal of blood, and I am tired of blood. You will come to live in this house. You will take my name. You will be treated well. No one will harm you. No one will touch you without your permission, including me. This is not negotiable, and it is not a courtship. It is an arrangement. Do you understand?" I don't understand any of this." "You will. I want to call someone. I want to call." "There is no one to call, Lena. There is no consulate coming for you. There is no policeman. Your father has signed papers. You came into this country on a visa I arranged. For the next 7 days, legally, you are already my wife. The ceremony at the end of the week is a formality." She stared at him. "You're insane," she whispered. "I am not." "You are. You are out of your mind. You can't. People don't. This isn't." "People do," he said. "They always have. You simply have not, until today, been one of the people it happens to." She didn't remember later how she got out of that room. She remembered a woman appearing at her elbow, older, gray-haired, kind-faced in a tired way, and a hand at the small of her back, and a staircase, and another staircase, and then a bedroom the size of her entire apartment back home. A 4-poster bed, a fireplace, French doors to a balcony, a closet already full of clothes in her size, a bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in. The door closed behind her. She heard from the other side a small mechanical sound, a lock. She ran to it. She turned the handle. It turned. The door did not open. She turned it again, and again, and again. She put her shoulder against it. She kicked it. The pain shot up her leg, electric, and she sat down on the floor and held her foot and let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a sob, something raw, something she didn't have a word for. She crawled to the French doors. She pushed them open. The balcony was wide and beautiful and overlooked the gardens and a long slope of olive trees rolling down to a stone wall at the far end of the property. It was maybe a 30-foot drop to the flagstones below. There was no trellis, there was no ladder. There were, she now noticed, 2 men in dark suits walking the perimeter of the garden with dogs. She stepped back inside. She went to the bathroom. She threw up. She stayed there a long time, on the cold marble floor with her cheek against the side of the tub. And she thought about her mother. She thought about her mother's hands. She thought about the smell of her mother's shampoo. She thought about the last thing her mother had said to her in the hospital. "Be a little bit smarter than me, baby. Promise me that. Promise me you'll be a little bit smarter than I was." And Lena had promised, and Lena had not been. She had gotten on the plane. She had gotten in the car. She had let go of her father's hand. It was dark when she finally came out of the bathroom. Someone had been in the room while she was on the floor. A tray of food on the small table by the window. a pitcher of water, a folded piece of cream-colored paper with her name on it in neat black ink. She opened the paper. Lena, eat, sleep. We will speak tomorrow. The door will be unlocked in the morning. You will be free to move through the house. You will not be free to leave the grounds. I regret the necessity of both of those sentences. M. She read it 3 times. Her hands were steady now. That was the strange part. Her hands had stopped shaking. Somewhere between the bathroom floor and the opening of this envelope, something inside her had gone quiet. Not calm. Quiet. The way a house goes quiet when the power cuts out. She walked to the window. She looked out at the dark garden, at the small, moving shapes of the men and their dogs, at the moon hanging low and yellow over the olive trees. Somewhere in this house, right now, her father was sitting in a room. Maybe eating a meal? Maybe drinking? Maybe already gone, driven back down that long white gravel road, already on his way back to whatever life he thought he still had. She understood, suddenly and without self-pity, that she was never going to see him the same way again. Whatever happened next. Whatever she survived. The man who had walked her off that plane and into this house was dead to her now. He had died somewhere between Newark and Florence, and she had been sitting right next to him, and she hadn't even noticed. She went back to the tray. She was not hungry. She made herself eat anyway. Bread, a piece of cheese, a small bowl of something warm and salty that tasted like the sea. She drank the water. She sat down on the edge of the enormous bed. It was made up with linens that probably cost more than her car. She pressed her palm against the duvet, and it was so soft it felt like an insult. "Okay," she said, out loud, to the empty room. Her voice was rough from crying. "Okay. Okay, Lena, okay." She didn't know what came after okay. She sat there for a long time. In the morning, the door was unlocked. She heard it, somewhere around 6, the same small mechanical sound, but in reverse. She had not slept. She had sat up in a chair by the window all night, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sky go from black to gray to pink to a pale gold that spilled across the terracotta rooftops of the outbuildings below. She waited an hour after she heard the lock. She didn't know why. Some stubborn instinct that said, "Don't give him the satisfaction of you running out." Then she got up. She washed her face. She put on the same clothes she had worn on the plane because she was not going to wear anything from his closet. Not yet. Not today. She opened the door. The hallway was empty. She walked. The villa in daylight was even bigger than it had seemed the night before. She passed rooms with the doors half open. A library, a sitting room, a study. A long gallery lined with more of those old paintings. Everywhere she went, she could feel the presence of other people somewhere just out of sight. A footstep around a corner, the clink of a dish, low voices in a language she didn't understand. No one stopped her. No one spoke to her. She made it to the ground floor. She made it to a pair of tall glass doors at the back of the house that opened onto a terrace. She pushed them open and stepped out into the Italian morning, and the air was so clean and cool it made her eyes sting. Marco Valenti was sitting at a small wrought iron table at the edge of the terrace. He had a newspaper folded neatly beside him, a small cup of espresso, a plate with a single piece of fruit on it. He was wearing a black sweater and dark trousers. His hair was still wet from the shower. He looked up at her the moment she appeared, as if he had been waiting, as if he had known exactly what time she would come. "Good morning, Lena?" She didn't answer. "Sit, please." She didn't move. He regarded her. He set the newspaper aside. He gestured once to the chair across from him, and when she still didn't move, he did something she did not expect. He stood up, walked around the table, and pulled the chair out for her himself. It was such a small thing, such a small, courteous, old-fashioned gesture, and somehow it was worse than anything else he had done, because it told her, very clearly, what the shape of this was going to be. He was not going to drag her through a doorway. He was not going to shout at her. He was not going to hit her. He was going to pull out her chair. He was going to pour her coffee. He was going to wait. He was going to wait, and he was going to wait, and eventually she was going to sit down. Because she was 19, and she was in a foreign country, and her father was gone, and her mother was gone, and the gate was locked, and there were men with dogs, and the bed upstairs was so soft it felt like an insult, and she was so tired. She sat down. He went back around the table. He sat down across from her. He poured her a cup of coffee from a silver pot without asking if she wanted one. "I know what you are thinking," he said quietly. "You are thinking that this is a prison." "It is a prison." "Yes, for now it is." He pushed the cup toward her. "But a prison, Lena, is only a prison if you stay the same person inside it. If you change, if you learn, if you watch, if you listen, then the walls begin to mean something different. Do you understand what I am telling you?" "No," she said. "You will." He picked up his own cup. He took a sip. The morning sun was coming through the cypress trees at a low angle, striking the stone of the terrace, warming her hands through her jeans. "Drink your coffee," he said. "It will get cold." She looked at him across the little table, at the silver at his temples, at the plain ring on his finger, at the quiet, patient, terrible stillness of his face. She picked up the cup. Her hand was steady. Somewhere deep inside her, underneath the fear and the grief and the sick, hot shame, something else had started. Something small. Something that felt almost like a pilot light catching in a cold house. She didn't have a name for it yet. She drank the coffee. The coffee was bitter in a way American coffee never was. Lena drank half of it before she realized she had been drinking it all, and that small act of forgetting, of letting her body do something ordinary while her mind was still screaming, felt like a tiny betrayal. She set the cup down too hard. The saucer rang against the iron tabletop. Marco did not look up from his newspaper. "There is a woman waiting for you in the East Wing," he said. "Her name is Julia. She has been with this house for 31 years. She was here before me. She will, in many ways, outlast me. You will find that she does not speak much English, but she will make herself understood. She has prepared a room for you, and she has prepared a schedule." "A schedule?" "Yes." "For what?" He folded the paper neatly. He set it aside. He looked at her with that same flat, considering patience, like she was a problem he had already solved in his head and was now waiting for her to catch up to. "For everything, Lena. For your days. You will have 3 meals. You will have lessons. You will have hours that belong to you and hours that do not. It is the same as any other life. It simply has a shape now." "I didn't ask for a shape." "No, you did not." He stood. He buttoned the cuff of his sweater in one small, absent motion, the way a man does a thing he has done every morning for 20 years. "You will begin with Italian," he said. "Tomorrow. Today you will rest. Today you will eat. Today you will walk in the garden if you wish. There are boundaries. Julia will show you where they are. Do not test them." "Or what?" She meant it to sound sharp. It came out small. Marco paused at the edge of the terrace. He looked back at her. The morning light caught the gray in his hair and turned it almost silver, and for a second he looked older than he had the night before, and tired in a way she had not expected. "Or nothing," he said. "There is no punishment, Lena. There is only the fact. The fact is, you cannot leave. Testing it will not change the fact. It will only tire you." He went inside. She sat alone at the little table for a long time. She watched a bee move between the lavender at the edge of the terrace and the small clay pot of rosemary by the steps. She watched the shadow of a cypress tree crawl slowly across the flagstones. She watched her own hand, resting on the wrought iron, and she watched it not shake, and she did not know if that was strength or numbness, and she was too tired to tell the difference. Julia found her there an hour later. The woman was small and square-shouldered and had the kind of face that had been weathered by decades of the same sun. She wore a gray dress with a white apron, and her hair was pinned up at the back of her head in a tight knot that was going white at the roots. When she saw Lena, she did not smile. She did not frown either. She simply stopped at the edge of the terrace and waited, her hands folded in front of her, the way a person waits for a child to finish crying before offering a tissue. "Signorina," she said, "I don't speak Italian." "I know." The accent was thick, but the English was clear enough. "Come." Lena stood. She followed. Julia walked her through the house at a slow, patient pace, naming rooms as they passed them. Cucina, sala, biblioteca. She did not translate. She repeated each word twice and moved on, and Lena understood somewhere beneath the exhaustion that this was the first lesson, and it had already begun, whether she had agreed to it or not. They ended in a long room on the second floor that had been, Lena guessed, someone's study once. The desk was heavy walnut. The shelves were floor to ceiling. A chalkboard had been set up against one wall, brand new, the wood of the frame still pale and unvarnished, a stack of books on the desk, a notebook, 2 pens, a glass of water. "Tomorrow," Julia said, pointing at the chalkboard. "Maestro, auto, 8 o'clock. 8 in the morning. See. What if I don't come?" Julia looked at her. The old woman's eyes were a surprising color, a pale gray-green, and they were not kind, but they were not unkind either. They were the eyes of someone who had seen a great many girls come into this house, and Lena understood, with a small cold-dropping sensation in her stomach, that she was not the first. "You come," Julia said. "But if I don't?" "You come, signorina." It was not a threat. That was what made it terrible. It was a statement about the shape of reality, the same way Marco had said you cannot leave, and Lena realized she was going to have to learn to listen to the difference between a threat and a fact in this house, because the facts were going to be the things that killed her, if she didn't. She nodded. Julia nodded back. Something in her small, wrinkled face softened, barely, a crack of a millimeter. "Brava ragazza," she said under her breath, and walked out. The first week was the worst, not because anything happened to her, because nothing did. Lena woke at 7. Lena went to lessons at 8. A small man named Alessandro with owlish glasses and an enormous patience drilled her on Italian verbs until her jaw ached. A different man, younger, came in the afternoons to teach her French, and she hated him on sight because he was too handsome and too pleased with himself, and he corrected her pronunciation with a small curl of his mouth that felt like being laughed at. She complained about him to Julia on the 3rd day. The 4th day, he was gone. A woman in her 50s took his place, with iron gray hair cut short and a voice like gravel, and Lena did not complain again. She ate 3 meals a day. She did not eat them with Marco. He was, she gathered, often away. In Rome, in Milan, once in Zurich. And when he was at the villa, he ate alone in a smaller room off the kitchen, and she ate alone on the terrace when the weather was good, and in the small breakfast room when it was not. Sometimes she heard him on the phone in his study, his voice low and level, always in a different language depending on the day. Italian, English, something that sounded German, something that might have been Russian. She could not tell. She sat on the stairs one evening and listened and did not understand a word, and it felt suddenly like the most urgent problem in her life. Not that she was trapped, not that she was engaged against her will to a man older than her father, but that she could not understand what was being said around her, in her own house, about her own life. She started studying harder the next morning. She did not tell herself she was doing it for him. She told herself she was doing it for herself. Because knowledge was the only thing in this place that no one could take away from her once she had it. Because a girl who understood the language was harder to lie to, and a girl who was harder to lie to was harder to move around like furniture, and she was never, ever going to be moved around like furniture again. Her father's name came up exactly once that week. It was the 5th day. She was walking back from the library with a book in her arm when she passed Marco in the hall. They almost collided. He caught her elbow briefly to steady her, the first time he had touched her since the day she arrived, and then released it immediately, the way a person lets go of a door handle. "You are well?" he asked. "I'm alive." "That is not the same." "No, it isn't." He studied her for a moment. She had lost weight. She knew she had. Her jeans were looser at the waist, and there was a hollow under her cheekbones that had not been there a week ago. She was not eating enough. She knew that, too. She didn't care. "Your father," he said, "has left the country." Her whole body stilled. "When?" "The morning after you arrived. I had him driven to the airport. He flew to London. From London, I do not know where he went. He has not contacted you. He will not, I think." "You don't know that." "I do." "How?" "Because I know the kind of man he is." He said it without cruelty. That was somehow worse than if he had said it with some. He said it the way a doctor might say the test results came back. And Lena understood, in that moment, what Marco Valenti actually thought of her father. Not hatred, not rage, a kind of flat clinical contempt that had already moved past contempt into something more like forgetting. She didn't know what to say. She stood there in the hallway with the book pressed against her chest, and she felt something crack, somewhere deep, and she hated that it was cracking because she had thought she was already done crying over her father. She had thought she had finished with him on the terrace the first morning. Apparently not. "He didn't say goodbye," she said. "No. He didn't even say goodbye." "Lena. No, don't do the voice." "What voice?" "The 'I'm sorry your life is like this' voice. I don't want it from you. I don't want anything from you." He was quiet. "Understood," he said finally. He moved to pass her. At the last second he stopped. He did not turn his head. "For what it is worth," he said, looking straight ahead down the hallway, "I did not know he had not told you. When I wrote the letter, the first one, I thought he had. When I realized on the drive from the airport that he had not," he paused, "I would have had the car turn around if it had been possible. But it wasn't. It was not." "Why?" "Because if he arrived at my door without you, Lena, he would not have survived the night. And regardless of what you think of him now, I did not believe you wanted that." She closed her eyes. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay. Thank you for saying that. It is not a kindness. I know." He walked on. The wedding happened on the 8th day. There was no ceremony, not really, no church, no dress. A man in a dark suit arrived at the villa in the early afternoon with a leather folder and a small silver pen, and Lena was brought into the study, and Marco was already there, and Julia was there, and 2 other men she had never seen before were there as witnesses. Papers were laid on the desk. Her name was already printed at the bottom of several of them in a font she did not recognize. Marco signed first. His signature was small and tight and black. She signed second. Her hand shook a little, and she hated that it did. The man in the suit sealed the papers with a little foil stamp and gave a small nod and shook Marco's hand and left. The entire thing took 11 minutes. Julia hugged her briefly before leaving the room. It was the first time anyone had touched her with anything resembling warmth since she had landed in Italy. It was so unexpected that Lena almost cried. She did not. She had started learning not to. When they were alone, Marco poured 2 small glasses of something dark from a decanter on the sideboard. He handed one to her. She looked at it. "What is it?" "Amaro, a digestive. It is tradition. I'm 19. In Italy, that is not relevant." She took a sip. It tasted like burnt herbs and dark sugar and medicine. She coughed. He almost smiled. The almost being as she was coming to understand the most he ever gave. "Salute," he said. "That means cheers." "Yes. I've been studying." "I know." He took a sip of his own. He did not cough. "You did not ask me," she said, "if I wanted to sign." "No." "Would it have mattered if I said no?" He considered the glass in his hand. "If you had said no," he said slowly, "I would not have forced your hand to the pen. I am not a man who signs contracts with unwilling parties. The paper would have no strength. But Lena, and I am telling you this because you have asked me the truth and you deserve the truth, if you had said no, you would still have lived in this house. You would still have been its mistress in every way that matters. Nothing about your situation would have changed, except that I would not have had the legal paper. That is the honest answer. So the paper is for you. The paper is for the world, for the people who must believe certain things in order for you to be safe within this house. The world outside our walls is not kind, Lena. There are men who would see you as a piece on a board. The paper makes you mine in their eyes. It makes hurting you the same as hurting me, and hurting me, for reasons you will come to understand, is something those men cannot afford. So I'm protection. You are protected. There is a difference. She drank the rest of the Amaro in one swallow. It burned going down. She welcomed it. "I want to see the garden," she said. "Alone. No one with me. Not tonight. I want to walk." He looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded once. "You will be watched," he said, "but no one will walk with you." "Yes." She set the glass down. She walked out of the room. She did not look back. The garden at dusk was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, and she hated it for being beautiful, because she did not want to be comforted by anything in this place. The light went soft and low over the olive trees. The cypress threw long black shadows across the path. The air smelled like rosemary, and dry earth, and somewhere in the distance, wood smoke. She walked until she found a stone bench at the far end of the lower terrace, half hidden behind a tangle of old wisteria, and she sat down on it, and she put her face in her hands, and she cried for 30 minutes straight, and she did not make a sound the entire time because she had learned already that silence was a form of privacy in a house where nothing was private. When she was done, she wiped her face on her sleeve. She stood up. She walked back to the villa. She ate dinner. She went to bed. The next morning, she went to Italian class at 8. Her verbs were better that day than they had been the day before. Weeks became a month. A month became 2. The house rearranged itself around her, or she rearranged herself around it, she could not tell which. The lessons multiplied. Italian in the morning, French after lunch. 3 times a week, a woman named Signora Conti came from Florence to teach her what Giulia called comportamento. Behavior, though it meant more than that. It meant how to sit, how to stand, how to enter a room, how to hold a wine glass, how to greet an ambassador, how to refuse an invitation without giving offense, how to accept one without giving ground. Signora Conti was in her 60s and had the posture of a woman who had once had to correct a queen and still considered that queen to have been a disappointment. "You walk like an American," she said on the first day. "It is a crime. We will fix it." "I am an American." "Not anymore, Cara. You are something else now. We will find out what." 2 afternoons a week, a man named Dario came to the villa. Dario was in his late 30s, former military, built like a piece of farm equipment, and the first time he walked into the gymnasium on the ground floor and told Lena he was going to teach her how to defend herself. She laughed at him. Actually laughed. Out loud. A hard, short bark of disbelief. He waited for her to finish. He did not smile. "You think this is funny, signorina?" "I think it's ridiculous. Who am I going to fight? The gardener. Anyone who comes through that gate with the wrong intent. That's what Marco's men are for. Marco's men will not always be in the room. I will not always be in the room. Your husband will not always be in the room." He said the word husband neutrally, without looking at her, as if it were any other word. "One day someone will reach for you, and there will be no one between you and them but you. On that day, signorina, you will wish you had not laughed at me." She stopped laughing. He taught her how to stand. He taught her how to breathe. He taught her how to fall without hurting herself, which took 3 weeks and left her black and blue from hip to shoulder, and she cried about it exactly once, privately, in the bathtub, with the door locked. Then he taught her how to get out of a wrist grab, then a hair grab, then a choke from behind, then eventually how to shoot. The first time he put a pistol in her hand, her whole arm started shaking. It was heavier than she had expected, colder. He adjusted her grip without speaking. He stood behind her and aligned her shoulders. He told her to breathe. He told her to squeeze, not pull. The first shot went into the dirt 20 feet short of the paper target. The second went over it into the trees. The 11th hit the paper. The 14th hit the black. By the end of that afternoon, she had bruises up both forearms, and her ears were ringing through the plugs, and she could not feel her fingers properly. And Dario looked at her targets, at the tight little cluster she had finally managed in the last magazine, and he grunted. "Not bad, signorina. That's the first compliment you've given me. It will be the last for some time. Do not get used to it." She smiled before she could stop herself. It surprised her. It was the first time she had smiled in the villa, as far as she could remember, and she caught Dario noticing it, and she wiped it off her face fast, like it was something embarrassing. He pretended not to see. Marco watched her change. She knew he watched. She caught him sometimes from the window of the gymnasium, standing at the edge of the terrace with a small cup of coffee in his hand, not obviously observing, just there, the way weather is there. Sometimes he was at the top of the stairs when she came up from a lesson, sometimes at dinner, because they had begun in the second month to eat dinner together once or twice a week at the long dining room table where she had first seen him, with both of them placed at the far ends so that they had to speak loudly to be heard, which meant they mostly didn't speak at all. He never asked her how the lessons were going. He never asked her if she was happy. He never asked her anything that had an easy answer. Instead, one night, over a plate of something small and expensive involving artichoke hearts, he asked her what she thought of the painting above the fireplace. She had not been expecting it. She looked up. She had passed the painting every day for 2 months, and she had never really looked at it, It was a landscape, a storm over a coastline, a small figure of a woman on a cliff, her back to the sea, walking away from the water. I don't know, Lena said. I don't know anything about art. I did not ask what you know about art. I asked what you think of the painting. I think... She paused. She actually looked at it for the first time. I think she's leaving someone. On the beach. The storm is behind her. She's already decided. Yes. Yes, what? That is what I think, too. He went back to his plate. He did not say anything else about the painting. Lena looked at it for the rest of the meal, and she looked at it every time she passed it after that. And she hated a little bit that he had given her the gift of actually seeing something she had walked past 100 times. She hated that the gift had cost her nothing. She hated that it was hers now, and she couldn't give it back. In the 3rd month, he took her to a dinner. It was not optional. Julia laid the dress out on her bed 3 days in advance. Long, dark green, cut simply, expensive in the quiet way that the most expensive things are quiet. A jeweler's box next to it, small and black, containing a pair of earrings that were not flashy and not modest, a thin gold chain for her neck, a pair of shoes that Signora Conti had made her practice walking in for a week beforehand. Where are we going? Lena asked. A home, Julia said. Whose home? Julia said a name. Lena did not recognize it. She asked Marco at dinner that night, across the long table. Matteo Raguso, he said, an associate. A friend. I said an associate. I did not say a friend. Is there a difference? There is always a difference, Lena. Never forget that in this world, there is always a difference. Should I be afraid? He set his fork down. He looked at her for a long time. You should be prepared, he said. There will be a woman there. Her name is Sofia Raguso. She is Matteo's wife. She is younger than he is, though older than you. She is clever. She is bored. She will test you. Every woman at that table will test you, but Sofia in particular will try to make you look small, because she does not yet know what you are, and she would prefer to decide what you are before you do. And what am I? That, Kara, you are going to have to show them yourself. I will not be able to help you in that room. I will be 20 feet away in a conversation about the price of cargo. You will be alone. Great. Helpful. It is the truth. I will not lie to you in this house. She looked down at her plate. Her hand had tightened on her knife without her noticing. She loosened it. She set the knife down carefully, the way Signora Conti had shown her, the handle resting at 4 o'clock on the plate. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. I'll be ready. He inclined his head just barely. The corner of his mouth moved the fraction of a millimeter she had come to understand was his version of good. The Raguso house was smaller than the villa, but somehow louder, richer, in that overstuffed way that suggested the wealth was newer or less secure or both. The chandeliers were too bright, the paintings were too many. A string quartet was playing in one corner of the ballroom, and no one was listening to them. Lena stepped into the room on Marco's arm, the first time she had taken his arm, ever, and she felt every head turn. She had been afraid she would freeze. She did not freeze. Signora Conti's voice was in her ear from 1,000 drills, chin level, shoulders back. You do not scan the room scans you. You look only at the face you are being introduced to, and you look at it as if you find it interesting, even when you do not. Especially when you do not. Matteo Raguso came to them first. He was a heavy man with a full silver beard and small watery eyes, and he kissed Marco on both cheeks and pumped his hand and spoke a flood of Italian so fast Lena caught perhaps 1 word in 5. Then he turned to her. His eyes went from her face to her feet and back again in one slow, appraising sweep, and she felt it like a hand moving over her. And Marco, standing beside her, his own hand resting very lightly at the small of her back, did not react, not visibly, except that his thumb pressed once against her spine. A small pressure, a signal she did not yet know how to read but understood anyway. Steady, it said. Now. She extended her hand. Piacere, Signor Raguso, she said. Her Italian was clean. Her pronunciation was good. She had been drilling this sentence for a week. Matteo's eyes brightened. He laughed, delighted, and kissed the back of her hand in a way that was exactly one heartbeat too long. Americana che parla italiano, he said. Marco, what have you done? She is a treasure, a little treasure. She is my wife, Marco said quietly. The correction was small. It was not unfriendly. It was the kind of correction a man makes without changing his tone, and Matteo heard it the way he was meant to hear it, and he released Lena's hand and he smiled a smaller, more careful smile, and he stepped back half an inch. Of course, he said. Of course. Come. My wife is dying to meet her. They were moved through the room. Marco was peeled off at the edge of the ballroom by two men in dark suits. Business, she understood. The real reason he was here. And Lena was passed, gently, to Sofia Raguso, who was every bit as Marco had described and also somehow more. Sofia was in her early 30s, black hair to her waist, a red dress cut to reveal an extraordinary amount of a very expensive body. Diamonds at her ears and her throat and her wrists. She kissed Lena on both cheeks in greeting and held her at arm's length and studied her with eyes that did not blink. So, Sofia said in English. Her English was perfect. Better than perfect. It had the lilting precision of someone who had been taught by the very best schools and had not forgiven those schools a single lesson. The American child. I'm 19. A child. I appreciate the welcome. I did not welcome you. I observed you. A laugh came from behind Sofia. Two other women, standing just within earshot, watching the exchange the way people watch a dogfight. Lena felt her face start to heat. She heard Signora Conti in her ear. When a woman tries to wound you with words, do not bleed for her. Do not let her see where the cut went in. Then I appreciate the observation, Lena said evenly. Such English, very… Ohio, is it? Yes. How charming. Marco has been to Ohio, I think, once. He told me it smelled like soybeans. Marco tells me many things. He does not tell me everything. I trust there is a reason. Sofia's smile did not falter, but her eyes did. Just a little, a tiny recalibration. The two women behind her stopped laughing. You speak well, Sofia said slowly, for someone so young. Thank you. It was not a compliment. I'll take it as one anyway. There was a beat. Sofia's lips parted. She was going to say something sharper. Lena could feel it coming. She braced. And then Sofia laughed. A real laugh, startled, throwing her head back. Dio mio, Sofia said. He has picked up a viper. I wondered what he was doing up there in that old pile of stones. Now I see. Come, little American, come. I am going to pour you a terrible amount of wine, and we are going to speak like civilized women, and you are going to tell me where you got those earrings, because they are the only thing about you that does not annoy me. They were a gift. From Marco. From my husband. Sofia looked at her again. Something in the look had changed, the way weather changes after a front passes. Same sky, different pressure. Yes, she said. From your husband. Come. Marco found her again an hour and a half later. She was standing at a tall window with a glass of wine she had barely touched, watching the garden lights flicker on across the lawn. She had survived it. More than survived. Sofia Raguso had introduced her to 6 other women, every one of them important, and Lena had said exactly the right thing, every time, in the right language, with the right face. Signora Conti's drills had held. Dario's lessons in breathing had held. Her own spine had held. She was shaking now, but quietly, the way a building shakes after the storm is past. Small. Internal. Private. Marco appeared at her shoulder without sound. He did not touch her. He stood beside her and looked out the same window. I heard what you said to Sofia, he said. Which part? The part about the reason. Oh, she has been repeating it to every woman in the room for the last 90 minutes. I do not know how she means it. I do not think she knows how she means it. She is impressed, which for Sofia is an inconvenient feeling. She is not accustomed to it. I was scared the whole time. I know. How? Your left hand. It has been in a fist off and on since she said the word Ohio. Lena looked down at her hand. He was right. She opened it. Her nails had left 4 small red crescents in her palm. I didn't notice. You are not supposed to. That is the point. You controlled what you could. You did very well, Lena. She turned her head and looked at him. Really looked, for the first time in weeks. He was in profile, his attention on the window, the line of his jaw clean, the small silver at his temple catching the light of the chandeliers. She did not know what she felt. It was not love, because she was not an idiot, and she was not going to let herself be an idiot about this. Not ever. It was not hatred either, which was the more dangerous thing, because hatred would have been simpler. It was something with more angles than either of those. Marco. Yes, I'm still not yours. He did not turn his head. He did not react. The corner of his mouth did the small thing it did. I know, he said. I want you to know that I know, that I'm keeping track. I would expect nothing less of you. I'm not going to forget how I got here. I do not want you to forget. Why not? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, and for the first time since she had met him, she heard something in it that was not quite control. Something older. Something tired. Because the day you forget, he said, is the day I lose whatever you are becoming. And whatever you are becoming, Lena, is the only interesting thing that has happened in this house in 20 years. He left her at the window. She stood there a long time after he was gone. Outside, beyond the garden lights, the Italian countryside was a low black shape under a low black sky. And somewhere inside her, the small pilot light that had caught on the terrace that first morning had grown. It was not a bonfire. It was not yet a fire at all. But it was warm enough now that she could feel it. She could feel it in her hands. She could feel it at the base of her throat. She could feel it in the place where, 2 months ago, there had only been fear. The string quartet in the corner of the ballroom started a new piece. She did not recognize it. She did not need to. She raised her glass, and she took a small sip of the wine she had been pretending to drink all night. And for the first time since she had landed in Italy, she tasted it. The wine was better than she had been pretending it was. That was the thing that stuck with her on the drive home, more than Sophia's laugh, more than the way the other women had started watching her by the end of the night. It was the small private fact that she had stood there at the window and finally tasted the glass in her hand, and it had been good. And she had not been allowed, somehow, to notice that until the danger had passed. She sat in the back of the car beside Marco, and she watched the countryside roll by in the dark. And she did not speak, because she did not trust her voice yet, and neither did he. And the silence between them on that drive was the first silence since she had come to Italy that did not feel like a cage. When they got back to the villa, it was past 2 in the morning. Julia was still up, which Lena had not expected, waiting in the foyer with a shawl over her dress and her hands folded in front of her the way they always were. The old woman looked at Lena's face once, quickly, the way a mother looks at a child coming home from her first real party, and whatever she saw there made her nod, small and satisfied, and she took Lena's wrap without a word and turned for the stairs. "Buonanotte, signora," she said over her shoulder. Signora. Not signorina. It was the first time Julia had called her a married woman to her face, and Lena stood in the middle of the cold marble foyer and felt the words settle on her shoulders like a coat she had not agreed to wear and could not now take off. Marco was at the sideboard pouring himself something. He did not offer her any. He understood by then that she would say no to anything she had not asked for, on principle, and that offering was its own small pressure. "You should sleep," he said. "I'm not tired. You're lying." "I know." He almost laughed, not out loud. The sound stayed inside his chest, a small, soft breath that she only caught because she was close enough to hear it. He set the decanter down. "Lena." "What?" "Thank you." She turned and looked at him. "For what?" "For not humiliating me tonight. I didn't do it for you." "I know you did not. That is why I am thanking you." She didn't know what to do with that. She did not have a good line to hand back. So she turned and she climbed the stairs without saying good night. And when she reached the landing, she allowed herself for one short second to glance back down at him. He was still standing at the sideboard, looking into his glass. He was not looking up. But she had the strangest feeling, walking the rest of the way to her room, that he had known she would look, and he had chosen, for reasons of his own, to let her. The week after the Raguso dinner, the villa felt different. Nothing visible had changed. The lessons continued. Alessandro with his verbs, Signora Conti with her correct and withering posture, Dario with his patient brutality in the gymnasium. But something in the way the house moved around her had shifted. Julia began bringing the household accounts to her after breakfast, small leather books full of numbers in a hand Lena could not yet fully read. A man she had never seen came from Florence with fabric samples and a measuring tape and asked her, in careful English, which of the spring patterns she preferred for the East drawing room, because the signora's opinion would be, of course, the deciding one. A delivery of flowers arrived for her personally from Sofia Raguso, with a small card that said in perfect Italian, "You are less tedious than I feared. We will have lunch on Thursday," and Lena had laughed out loud reading it, a real laugh, startled out of her. And then she had looked around to see who had heard and had been relieved to find the room empty. She was being recognized. That was the word for it. Not accepted, not yet, not trusted, but recognized. Treated by the small sealed world that had received her as a thing that existed, with weight and a shape. And the strange dark truth of it was that Lena, who had come into this house swearing she would never become what it wanted her to become, found that she did not entirely hate being seen. She hated that she did not hate it. That was the more honest thing. She lay awake some nights chewing on it like a piece of gristle she could not swallow. Because what did it say about her exactly? That the girl from Ohio, who had been sold like a bolt of cloth 3 months ago, was now finding it pleasant when a fabric merchant bowed to her opinion, when Julia called her signora, when a room full of women in Florence looked at her a second time and looked differently the second time than the first. What did it say about her that some small, warm, ugly part of her liked it? She did not tell Marco. She did not tell anyone. Some things a person had to carry alone. What she did tell him one night over dinner was that she wanted to learn about his work. He set down his knife. "No," he said. "Why?" "Because it is not a thing you want to know. That's not your decision. In this, Lena, it is. You made me your wife. Legally, in front of witnesses. You put me in a dress and took me to a house full of your associates and their wives. You let Sofia Raguso size me up like a racehorse. You are not now going to tell me that I'm allowed to be the decoration on top of this life, but not allowed to know what the life is. That's not a deal. That's a cage with nicer furniture." He looked at her for a long moment. The candle between them was low, guttering. She could see her own face, very small, reflected in his pupils. "Some of what I do," he said slowly, "would disgust you. Then it will disgust me. That's my problem. And some of what I do," he said, "would put you at risk, if you knew it. Because knowing is how one becomes useful. And useful, in my world, is how one becomes a target. Marco, I am already a target. You told me that yourself 3 months ago, on our wedding day. You told me I was valuable because I was married to you, and that men would look at me like a piece on a board. If that is already true, then the only question is whether I am a piece that understands the game, or a piece that gets moved." He was quiet a long time. He picked up his glass. He set it down without drinking. "All right," he said finally. "All right, what? All right, I will tell you what I do. Not all of it, not yet, but the shape of it, the part you can hold. We will begin next week. On Mondays. After your lessons with Alessandro, you will come to the study, and I will show you what is on my desk." She had not expected him to agree. She had argued as if she were going to have to argue for a month. She had come to dinner braced for a fight, and now she sat there with her small speech half used in her mouth, and she did not know what to do with the rest of it. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Monday. Monday." She looked down at her plate. She found, to her surprise, that her hand was not shaking. She did not know, yet, whether that was because she was brave or because something inside her had moved past the place where fear lived. She did not think, at that moment, that she wanted to know. Some questions it was better to leave closed until you were certain you could handle the answer. Monday, he showed her a map. It was pinned to a large corkboard in the corner of his study behind a panel that slid aside, and Lena had walked through the study 100 times and never noticed the panel was there. The map was of Europe. There were small colored pins in it. Some were clusters. A dense thicket along the Dalmatian coast, another around Marseille, a third in a small knot near Antwerp. Some were scattered alone. A single black pin in Gdansk. A single red pin in a Swiss lake town she could not pronounce. What do the colors mean? Green is movement. Red is men. Black is money. Movement of what? Movement of what is permitted to move. Goods, in the legal sense. Cargo that passes through ports my family has a relationship with. Olive oil, wine, textiles, and other things less interesting than textiles. Less interesting meaning less legal. Less interesting meaning we will discuss it another Monday. She did not push. She understood already that pushing with Marco was the worst possible strategy. He did not respond to force. He responded to patience. Patience was a game she had not played in her life before this house, and was now, to her own quiet alarm, beginning to get good at. Red is men, she said. What does that mean? It means the families with whom I have an arrangement. Some are business, some are blood. Some are old enemies who have agreed to be allies, and who must be watched very closely because their memories are longer than their agreements. And black is money. Black is where the money sleeps. He tapped the pin in the Swiss town. Here, and 2 other places I will not show you on this board. There are men in those towns whose entire careers are the quiet keeping of things. They do not know my name. They know a number, and the number has a face, and the face is not mine. It is a lawyer in Milan who has done this for my family since before I was born. If something happens to me, Lena, that lawyer will come to you. His name is Vittorio De Angelis. You will remember that name. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked me to tell you what I do. No, why are you telling me what happens if something happens to you? That's not the shape of the work. That's the shape of the ending. He looked at her. There was something in his face she had not seen before, a small tired softness around the eyes, a thing that was almost but not quite sadness. Because Lena, in this work, the shape of the ending is always in the room. A man who does what I do and forgets that is a man who does not last. You asked me to tell you the truth. That is part of the truth. You think you're going to die. I think every man dies. I think the men in my family, historically, die sooner than most. I think that when I die, you will be young enough to still have most of a life ahead of you, and I would prefer you have the information to live that life well. She looked at the board for a long moment. She looked at the small pins. She looked at the Swiss lake town where the money slept. She thought about her father, somewhere in the world, drunk or not drunk, alive or not alive, a man she was not going to see again if she was lucky. She thought about her mother in the ground in Ohio. She thought about the small, warm pilot light inside her chest that had become, over the last 3 months, something steadier. Marco. Yes, I'm not going to be a widow in this house. You do not get to choose that. I'm telling you, I'm not going to let you be stupid enough to get killed. I didn't survive the first 3 months of this marriage so that I could spend the rest of it in a black veil. For the first time since she had known him, Marco Valenti laughed. Actually, laughed. A short, startled sound, low in his chest, and his face changed when he did it. A slight opening, a small crack in the stone. Duly noted, he said. I mean it. I know you do. He slid the panel closed. The map disappeared. The study was a study again. Go, he said. Julia will have lunch. Signora Conti is expecting you at 3. I know. I know you know. She smiled a little despite herself and walked out. She did not realize until she was halfway down the hall that she had smiled. She caught herself at the top of the stairs. She stood there for a second, her hand on the banister, and she held on to the smile for a beat longer than she meant to, and then she let it go. The attack came in the 5th month. It came on a Tuesday. She remembered that later with the strange clarity that violence always leaves behind, not the details of the violence itself, which blurred, but the ordinary things around it. Tuesday. A gray morning with a light rain that had stopped by 10, the smell of bread from the kitchen, a bowl of oranges on the sideboard. Julia humming a song Lena did not know as she carried folded linens up the back stairs. Marco had left the villa before dawn for a meeting in Rome. He had not said goodbye. She had not been awake. She did not, on that particular morning, know that she was going to wish later that she had been. She was in the library when she heard the first shot. She did not at first understand that it was a shot. She understood that it was a sound, a flat, hard crack from the direction of the front gate, distant, muffled by the old stone walls. She looked up from her book. She waited for the ordinary world to explain it. A car backfiring. a piece of equipment in the outbuildings. Something a house like this made that a house like the one she had grown up in did not. Then the second shot came, and the third. And suddenly it was not one sound but many sounds, overlapping, closer now, and she heard a man shouting in Italian from somewhere at the front of the house. And she heard glass, somewhere, a high, clean, tinkling smash. And she felt, in her chest, a feeling that she had only had once before in her life. On the drive from the airport, with her father beside her, when she had realized she was not being taken to a business meeting, she stood up. The book fell on the floor. She did not pick it up. Dario had said on the afternoon of their first lesson, "If something happens in this house, you do not run toward it and you do not run away from it. You find the nearest hard wall and you put your back to it, and you remember where every door is, and you breathe." She put her back to the library wall. She counted doors. 3. The main one into the hall, a smaller one behind the reading desk that led, she knew, to a servant's passage. A third, barely a door at all, a low, narrow panel cut into the bookshelves that opened onto a stairway down to the wine cellar. Marco had shown it to her, casually, on a walk through the house in the first month, the way a man points out a fire exit in a hotel. She had thought, at the time, that it was an odd thing to show her. She understood now, with a cold dropping certainty, that it had never been odd, that everything Marco had shown her in this house, every door, every passage, every one of Dario's afternoon drills, every breath of patient instruction Signora Conti had beaten into her posture, had been for this. The sound of the shots was getting closer. Julia. The thought hit her like something physical. Julia was upstairs, with the linens. Julia was 60-something years old, and she was humming a song on the back stairs, and she did not carry a gun, and she did not know how to fall without hurting herself. And she was, in every way that mattered, Lena's responsibility. Lena moved. She did not run. Dario had drilled that out of her too. Running made you clumsy. Running made you loud. Running made you a shape that caught the eye. She walked fast, close to the wall, and she slipped out the small door behind the reading desk, into the narrow servant's passage, and the passage was dim and smelled like old wood and lemon polish, and she knew every turn of it by heart now because she had walked it with Julia for weeks to learn the household. She came out on the second-floor landing. She could hear downstairs men shouting. She could hear a door being kicked. She could hear, now, a different sound. Not rifle cracks, but the fast, flat pops of handguns, closer, inside the house. "Julia," she whispered. She moved down the hall toward the linen room. She passed an open window. She did not look out. Looking out was a shape in a window, and a shape in a window was a target. She kept to the inside wall. She moved. Julia was in the linen room. She had heard the shots, too. The old woman was standing very still in the middle of the room with a folded sheet in her arms, and her face was gray, and her mouth was a tight, thin line. And when she saw Lena in the doorway, she opened her mouth and Lena shook her head once, fast, and put a finger to her lips. "The cellar," Lena whispered. "Can you walk fast?" "Yes." "Come." "Signora." "Now." Julia came. She dropped the sheet. She came. They went back down the servant's passage. Lena led. Her hand was on the small pistol she had started, a month ago, carrying in a holster at the small of her back under her cardigan, a thing Dario had insisted on, a thing Marco had permitted without comment, a thing she had complained about for 2 weeks and then stopped thinking about. She did not now stop thinking about it. She was very aware of its weight. She was very aware of the safety. She was very aware that she had never pointed it at a person in her life, and that the distance between paper targets in a field and a person in a hallway was not a distance that could be measured in meters. They reached the library. They crossed it. Lena opened the small panel into the bookshelf. Julia went through first. Lena followed. She pulled the panel shut behind her. The stairs were narrow and turned sharply. The stone was cold. There was no light. Lena held Julia's elbow with one hand and kept the other hand on the pistol at her back. And they went down in darkness, step by step. And when they reached the bottom, the cellar opened in front of them, long and low-ceilinged, racks and racks of bottles in the dim light of a single electric bulb. "There's a second door," Lena whispered, "through the back. It opens onto the garden." "I know, Signora. Can we lock the panel from this side?" "See, there is a bar." "Do it." Julia did it. The old woman's hands were shaking badly, but she did it. The heavy iron bar dropped into the brackets with a low, muffled clunk that Lena felt more than heard. They stood in the dim cellar. Lena's heart was going so hard she could hear it in her ears. Julia sank down onto an overturned crate. Her face was white. Her mouth was moving silently. Upstairs somewhere, a man screamed. It was not a long scream. It was not the kind of scream movies trained you to expect. It was short, and it was wet, and it stopped. Julia closed her eyes. Lena took the pistol out of the holster. She checked the safety. She did not click it off yet. Dario's voice was in her head. A gun in your hand is not yet a gun. It becomes a gun when your finger is on the trigger. Until then, it is a tool. Do not make it a gun until you need to. How many ways into this cellar? She whispered. 2, the stairs. The garden door. Is the garden door locked? Always. From both sides. Key. On my... Julia fumbled at her waist. She had a small ring of keys at her belt under her apron. Her hands were trembling. She could not find the one she wanted. Lena took the ring gently from her, and Julia whispered the shape of the key, and Lena found it. They moved toward the garden door at the back of the cellar, and that was when the footsteps started on the cellar stairs behind them. Lena froze. They were on the wrong side of the bar. The bar was holding. The bar would hold. The panel at the top of the stairs was heavy oak, and the bar was iron, and no one was going to come through it quickly. But the footsteps were coming down anyway, slow, heavy, deliberate, and Lena realized with a plunging, sick certainty that whoever was on those stairs had not come through the library panel. There was another way in. Of course, there was another way in. There was always another way in a house this old, and she had not been shown all of it yet, because she had only been in the house 5 months, and Marco had been in this house his entire life, and the man on those stairs had maybe been in this house longer than Marco had. Lena turned. She thumbed the safety off the pistol. Dario's voice. Breathe out when you fire, not in. 2 shots. Always 2 shots. A man goes down on 1, he gets up on 2. Julia behind her, very small. Signora, per favore. Get behind the rack, the big one, against the wall. Go. Julia went. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. A man stepped into the dim light of the single cellar bulb. He was not large. That was the first thing Lena noticed. She had expected somehow that the men coming to kill them would be large. This man was wiry, medium height, maybe 40 years old, with a short dark beard and a black windbreaker and a pistol in his right hand held low at his thigh. He was breathing evenly. He was not sweating. He looked, she understood, like a man who did this for a living. He saw her. He stopped. He did not raise the pistol. Not yet. He tilted his head the way a man might tilt his head at a cat that had unexpectedly walked into a room where no cat should have been. Signora Valenti, he said. His voice was soft, almost polite. Metti giù la pistola, non voglio farti del male. Put the gun down. I do not want to hurt you. Her Italian was good enough to know he was lying, because a man who did not want to hurt her did not come down the back cellar stairs of her house on a Tuesday morning with a pistol in his hand. Her Italian was also good enough to know what he thought of her, because he had used the familiar tu, the form you used with a child or a dog or a woman you had already decided in your head was not a person whose name you needed to remember. Her hand was steady. That was the thing that surprised her. Later, thinking about it, not that her hand was steady, but that she noticed it was steady, and she noticed it in the moment, and the noticing did not make it less steady. Something very quiet had happened inside her in the previous 60 seconds. Something had gone still, the way a lake goes still right before a storm. And in the middle of that stillness, Lena Hayes, 19 years old, from Ohio, who 5 months ago had not been able to unlock the door of her own bedroom, raised her pistol, and she exhaled, and she shot the man in the chest. The sound was enormous in the cellar. Her ears rang. He stumbled back 1 step. His own pistol came up reflexively, and she fired the second shot, the way Dario had taught her, because a man goes down on 1 and he gets up on 2, and the second shot hit him higher than the first, and he fell sideways against a wine rack and took 3 bottles down with him, and the glass broke on the stone floor, and the wine ran out across the flagstones in a long dark stain that in the dim light looked like something else. He did not move. Lena stood with the pistol still raised. Her arms were shaking now, finally, a fine continuous tremor, but her hands had not moved off the grip. She listened. She listened so hard her ears hurt. Upstairs somewhere, there were still men. She could hear them distantly. Footsteps, a voice, the crack of something being broken. But down here, in the cellar, there was only her breathing, and Julia's breathing, and the slow, small sound of wine dripping off the edge of a shelf onto the stone. "Julia," she whispered, "stay there." See. Lena walked to the man. Her legs did not feel like hers. She walked anyway. Dario's voice, "You do not assume. You confirm." He was dead. She confirmed. She did not look for long. She took his pistol out of his hand. His fingers were already loose, and she slid it into her waistband on the other side from her own. She took his phone out of his jacket pocket. It was locked. She took it anyway. She took a small folded piece of paper out of his other pocket, and she did not look at it, and she put it in her own pocket, and she backed away from him. She turned to Julia. The old woman was pressed against the wall behind the wine rack, her eyes enormous, her mouth a small O. "We're going out of the garden door," Lena said. Her voice was very calm. She did not know why. "We are going to go out, and we are going to stay close to the west wall, and we are going to go to the stone shed at the bottom of the olive grove, and we are going to wait there until Marco comes." "Signora, your hand—" "I'm fine. Come." "Your hand is bleeding." Lena looked down. She was, in fact, bleeding. A fine line of red on the back of her left hand, where a splinter of bottle glass must have caught her when the wine rack came down. She had not felt it. She was not feeling it now. She wiped it absently on her skirt. "I'm fine," she said again. "Come." She unlocked the garden door. She eased it open. The garden was empty. The rain had stopped. A blackbird was singing somewhere in the cypress trees, as if nothing in the world had changed, which was, she understood, the deepest cruelty of the world, that birds kept singing through the worst things that happened to you, as if none of it counted. She stepped out. She held Julia's elbow. They crossed the garden low and fast, staying close to the west wall, the way Dario had told her to move when you did not want to be seen. They reached the olive grove. They went down through the trees. They reached the stone shed at the far end, half hidden in a tangle of brambles, a place the men of the villa used to store equipment, and Lena eased the door open with her shoulder and pulled Julia inside and pulled the door closed behind them. It was dark. It smelled like damp earth and oil and old burlap. Julia sank down onto a pile of sacks and began, very quietly, to cry. Not loudly. The way old women cry when they have been taught their whole lives that crying is not a thing a good woman does where anyone can hear. Lena sat down beside her on the sacks. She kept the pistol in her hand. She did not put it down. She put her other arm around the old woman's shoulders, and she pulled her in, and she let her cry into her shoulder. "Shh," Lena whispered. "Shh, shh. It's okay. We're okay. We're okay." She did not know, saying it, whether it was a promise or a prayer. Outside in the distance she could hear more shots, then fewer, then none. She sat in the dark shed with Julia's small shaking weight against her, and the pistol heavy in her hand and the blood drying on the back of her other hand, and she listened to the silence that came after, and she understood, with a kind of clarity that did not feel like triumph and did not feel like grief, but like a third thing she did not have a name for, that whoever had walked into the cellar 5 minutes ago was not the same person sitting in this shed now. The person in the shed had killed a man. The person in the cellar had not. She did not know, yet, what that was going to cost her. She suspected it would cost her something. It would cost her something every night, probably, for a long time. But it had not cost her her hands, and it had not cost her Julia, and it had not cost her the rest of her life. And for the moment, sitting in the dark with an old woman crying quietly into her shoulder, that was enough. She waited for Marco. Somewhere beyond the olive trees, far off, she heard the first distant sound of a car engine on the gravel drive. Fast, coming up hard. The kind of fast that only arrived when a man had been told, in the middle of a meeting in Rome, that his house was on fire and his wife was inside it. She closed her eyes. She held Julia tighter. She did not let go of the gun. The engine on the gravel got closer, and then there were more engines, 2, 3, and then the short, sharp sounds of car doors slamming, and then men shouting. But these were different voices. Voices she knew, the low, even Italian of the men who worked for Marco. She heard her own name being called. Not Lena. Signora Valenti, Signora Valenti, over and over, moving through the garden, moving toward the cellar, fanning out across the grounds. She did not answer right away. It was Dario who had trained her not to. You do not call out to a voice until you have seen the face behind the voice. A voice can be borrowed. A face cannot. So she sat in the dark shed with Julia trembling against her and the pistol in her hand, and she waited, and after a few minutes she heard the footsteps come down through the olive grove, deliberate, unhurried, and a voice that she would have known anywhere in the world, even in hell, said quietly in English from the other side of the door, "Lena." She did not move. "Lena, it is me. It is Marco. If you are in there, do not shoot me, per favore. I am going to open the door." She lowered the pistol, slowly, onto her lap. Her hand was shaking finally, now that it was allowed to. Her whole arm was shaking. "I'm here," she said. Her voice came out thin. "I'm here. Julia's here. We're here." The door scraped open. The light came in sideways, pale and wet, and too bright after the dark of the shed. Marco stood in the opening. He was wearing the same dark suit he had left in before dawn. There was blood on his left sleeve that was not his. His hair was wrong, pushed back by a hand that had moved too fast. His face, when he saw them, did something she had never seen it do. It broke. Only for a second. Only for a moment so short that if she had blinked, she would have missed it. But she did not blink. She saw it. The mask he wore, the one that had been on his face every minute of every day for 5 months, the one that had never once fallen in her presence. It fell. Something raw underneath showed through. Something that was not cold and was not calm and was, for one breath, afraid. Then it was gone, and he was walking into the shed, and he was crouching in front of her on the oil-stained floor, and his hand, the one that wasn't bloody, came up and touched her face, the side of her cheek, very lightly, the way a man touches something he has been afraid was broken. "Are you hurt?" "No." "The blood. It's glass. From a bottle? It's nothing." "Julia." "I am well, Padrone," the old woman whispered. Her voice was wet. "I am well. The signora, I know." "You know. Tommaso told me. On the drive. They found—" He broke off. He looked at Lena. He looked at the pistol still resting on her lap. He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. She understood. Tommaso was one of his men. Tommaso had gone into the cellar. Tommaso had seen the dead man against the wine rack, and Tommaso had counted the shots in the body, and Tommaso had called Marco on the drive from Rome and told him it was her. Marco's hand was still on her face. His thumb had moved once along the line of her cheekbone and stopped. "Can you stand?" he said. "Yes." "Then stand, cara. Come inside. We will—" He stopped again. He seemed for a moment to have lost the language. He shook his head once, a small, private gesture, as if telling himself to get it together. "We will go to the house, Julia. Let me help you." He lifted Julia first. The old woman was unsteady on her feet, and he put an arm around her shoulders the way a son might, and she leaned into him and whispered something in Italian too fast for Lena to catch. He answered in Italian, low and quiet, and kissed the top of her gray head once. Lena watched them. She felt, watching, a small, strange, aching thing in her chest that was not jealousy and was not sadness and was, she realized, the simple ordinary recognition that this house had held a life in it before her and would hold one after her, and that the man she had married was not, as she had sometimes let herself pretend, a stranger. Then he turned back to her, and he offered her his hand, and she took it, and she stood up. She was dizzier than she had realized. She swayed. His other arm came around her waist before she knew it was coming, and she was held briefly against the side of his body, and she could feel the hammer of his heart through his shirt, and it was not steady. It was going very, very fast. She did not say anything about it. He did not either. They walked back up through the olive grove to the villa. His men were everywhere by then, working the grounds, working the house. A small dark-haired one at the gate, another 2 at the front door, another carrying a long black bag with a shape in it out of the service entrance. The shape, she understood, was the man she had shot. She did not look at it. She did not need to. Inside the house, Julia was taken away by two of the younger women who ran the kitchen. Taken, Lena understood, to be wrapped in blankets and given something hot, and put in a chair by a fire and watched. Marco guided Lena up the main staircase, his hand light at the small of her back, not pressing, just there. He took her past her bedroom. He took her instead to his. She had never been in his bedroom before. It was smaller than hers. That was the first thing she noticed, somewhere in the back of her numb-shocked mind. Simpler. A dark wood bed, unmade. A book open face down on the nightstand. A reading lamp still on from the night before. A closet door half open with his shirts in a neat dark row. A small brass lock on the inside of the main door that he turned, once, behind them. She did not flinch at the sound of the lock. A week ago she might have. A month ago she certainly would have. Now she just watched him turn it, and she understood what it meant, and she did not flinch. "Sit," he said. "Marco." "Sit, Lena, please. I need you to sit." She sat, on the edge of his bed. He went into the adjoining bathroom. She heard water running. He came back with a small wet cloth and a little glass bottle of something clear and a strip of white gauze. And he knelt in front of her on the floor, and he took her left hand, very gently, and he turned it over to look at the cut. She looked down at the top of his head. She had never been this close to him before. His hair was thicker than it had looked from across a dining table. There was a small white scar along his temple she had never noticed. She could smell him, soap, and something darker under the soap, a clean human smell of a man who had driven very fast for 3 hours in a car. He cleaned the cut. The clear liquid stung. She did not flinch. He wound the gauze twice around the back of her hand, small and neat. The way a man does a thing he has done for other people before, in other rooms, in other years, in another life she did not know, and did not now have the energy to ask about. He tied it off. He did not let go of her hand. "Marco. Un momento." "Marco, Un momento, Lena. Please, I need a moment. Before I can speak." He kept her hand. He did not look up. She watched him. And slowly, over the course of perhaps a minute, maybe longer, she had lost the ability to measure time. She watched his shoulders, which had been rigid, ease by some small amount. She watched the hard line of his jaw soften into something that was only tired. She watched him breathe in and out, the way Dario had taught her to breathe before a shot, and she understood that the most powerful man she had ever met was sitting on the floor of his own bedroom, holding her hand and trying to remember how to be a person. Finally, he looked up at her. His eyes were wet. Not crying. Wet. There was a difference. Crying was a thing that was leaving. This was a thing that had been held so long it was just sitting at the top of him with nowhere to go. "I should not have left you this morning. You didn't know." "It does not matter. I should not have left you. I have known for 3 weeks that someone was moving against me. I have known for 3 weeks, Lena. I should have been in this house. You said you had a meeting in Rome." "The meeting in Rome was the bait. I see that now. They waited for me to leave the villa. They were not coming for me. They knew they could not take me. They came for you." She did not say anything. "You understand what that means," he said. "Yes." "Tell me what it means." "It means somebody thought that if they could take me, they could have you." "Yes." "And it means they were right." He looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said again, more quietly. "It means they were right." It sat in the air between them. Neither of them tried to take it back. It was, she understood, the most honest thing he had ever said to her, and it was terrible, and it was also a gift, because a man who said a thing like that out loud could not afterward pretend he had not. It was a commitment in the shape of a confession. She did not know what to do with it. She put her other hand, the uninjured one, on top of his, where it still held hers, and she left it there. She did not speak. She did not trust her voice. Marco closed his eyes. For the second time that afternoon, she watched his face do something it had never done before. He let out a long, slow breath, and he lowered his forehead gently to the back of her hand, and he held it there. She felt the warmth of his skin. She felt the small movement of his breath. She felt, underneath everything, the tremor in his shoulders that he was trying not to let her see. She did not pull away. After a while, a long while, he raised his head. He cleared his throat. He stood up. He moved away from the bed to the window, and he looked out at the garden, and his back was to her, and she understood that he had needed, for a moment, to not be looked at. His name was Andrea Bellini, he said to the glass. The man in the cellar. I know his people. I have known them for 20 years. I did business with his father. I will find out, before tomorrow morning, who sent him. I will find out before tomorrow morning who paid him. I will find out before the end of this week whose idea it was. And then Lena. He stopped. And then what? He did not answer. Marco, and then what? I do not want to tell you. Tell me anyway. He turned from the window. His face was composed again. The mask was mostly back on, but the eyes were different now. They had been changed by something, and she had been in the room while the changing happened, and she was not going to forget the shape of what she had seen. And then I will remind them, he said, why men in this country have been afraid of my family for 140 years. You're going to kill them. Some of them. All of them. Lena, say it. Say what you mean. I'm done with the soft version. After this morning, I'm done. He was quiet for a long time. All of them who touched this, he said finally. Yes. She nodded. She did not flinch. Something inside her, she noticed with a distant clinical curiosity, had stopped flinching at certain kinds of sentences, and she did not know, yet, whether that was because she had grown up or because she had been broken down. She suspected those two things were often the same thing and got called different names depending on who was doing the naming. I killed a man today, she said. I know. I want to tell you what it felt like. Tell me. It didn't feel like anything. That's what's wrong with me. He came down the stairs, and he pointed a gun at me, and he called me Signora Valenti, and he used 2 instead of lei, and I shot him twice in the chest because Dario taught me 2 shots, and he fell down, and it didn't feel like anything, Marco. It felt like a thing you do, like closing a door. And then in the shed I held Julia while she cried, and I kept waiting for it to hit me, and it didn't hit me, and then you came, and it still didn't hit me. And I'm sitting on your bed telling you about it, and it's still not hitting me. And what is wrong with me? Her voice broke on the last word. She had not realized she was going to cry until the word came out. And then the crying came all at once, the way a dam goes, not a trickle but a wall. And she put both hands over her face, and she let it come. He crossed the room in 3 steps. He sat down on the bed beside her, not touching her, just there. And he waited. When she finally slowed, it took minutes, she did not know how many. He spoke. His voice was very low, very even. Nothing is wrong with you, Lena. Something is wrong with me. Normal people have never been asked to do what you did this morning. There is no normal person on earth who knows what that is like until they have done it. Afterward, there is no one way. Some men weep, some men cannot speak. Some men go very still inside and carry it for years, and one day in a bar 30 years later it comes out at them when they are looking at a wine glass. Some men laugh. Some men do not laugh again for a long time. What you feel or do not feel right now, in this hour, tells you nothing. It will come, Cara. Whatever is going to come will come. Later. Maybe tonight. Maybe in 6 months. There is no wrong way, and there is no shame. You kept Julia alive. You kept yourself alive. That is all that mattered this morning. That is the only thing that mattered. She lowered her hands. Her face was wet. She wiped it with the edge of her palm. Her fingers were still trembling. I don't want to be alone tonight, she said. It came out before she had decided to say it. She heard herself say it, and she felt a hot rush of humiliation and a colder rush of honesty, and she did not take it back. Marco was quiet for a long time. I will sleep on the chair, he said finally. In your room, if you want. Okay? Only if you want. I want, then that is what I will do. She looked at him, sitting on the edge of the bed beside her, his face turned slightly away, his hands folded in his lap like a boy who had been told to keep his hands in his lap. And something in her, some tired, soft, cracked open thing, reached across the small gap of bedspread between them and took his hand. He looked down at their hands. He did not pull away. Marco. Yes. I'm not in love with you. I know. I might be someday. I don't know. I don't know what I am yet, but I want you to know that I'm not. I'm not going to lie to you about it. Not today, not after today. I know, Lena. I don't know what this is, what we're doing. I do not need you to know. I do not need you to decide anything. Not today, not tomorrow, not this year. Do you understand me? Yes. Good. His thumb had begun very slowly to move against the back of her hand, a small absent stroke. She did not think he knew he was doing it. She did not mention it. She let him do it. Outside, somewhere in the house, a door opened and closed. A man's voice said something in Italian. Another answered. The ordinary machinery of the villa had already begun again, the way it always did. The way it had for 140 years. The house cleaning up after itself. The staff resetting the rooms. A gardener already being sent to sweep the cellar. A doctor somewhere in Florence already being called to come look at Julia's blood pressure. The world, in this house, did not stop for death. The world in this house incorporated death the way a river incorporates a stone, and kept flowing. Lena leaned her head very slowly against Marco's shoulder. He stiffened, once, out of surprise, and then he let her. They sat like that for a long time. She did not know how long. The light through the window changed and changed again, and the afternoon bled into the early evening, and somewhere she could smell bread again from the kitchen, and she thought, with a distant fuzzy amazement, they baked bread today. They baked bread on the day that men came into this house with guns. They baked bread. Because bread is something you do. Because life is something you do. After a while, Marco spoke very quietly against the top of her head. Lena. I have to make phone calls now. I am sorry. I cannot not make them. I know. Will you be all right if I go? Yes. I will come back. Before dark. I will have dinner sent up. Julia will come sit with you if you wish. Okay. I will not leave the villa tonight. Okay. He got up from the bed, slowly, as if he were sorry to. He paused at the door. He turned back once. He looked at her sitting there on the edge of his bed with her bandaged hand and her tangled hair and the line of dried blood on her cheek that neither of them had cleaned yet, and he looked at her for a long moment, and then he said, "Thank you, Cara, for being alive tonight. That is the only thing I needed from this day." He closed the door softly behind him. The days after the attack were a kind of dreaming. The villa was quieter than it had ever been. Marco did not leave the grounds. His meetings came to him. Cars came up the gravel drive with dark-suited men inside, and the men sat with Marco in his study for long hours, and when they came out, their faces were tight, and they did not look at Lena when she passed them in the hall, which was its own kind of respect. Julia, to everyone's astonishment, insisted on returning to her duties within 2 days, although Marco ordered her off the back stairs until further notice and installed a girl of 23 named Paola to do the heavier carrying. Julia pretended to be offended. She was not offended. Lena saw her, on the third evening, holding Paola's hand briefly in the kitchen and pressing a small folded banknote into it, a tip for having taken the weight off an old woman's knees without being asked. Lena did not mention it. Some kindnesses were for the kindness giver alone. She did not sleep well those first nights. Marco did in fact sleep in the chair in her room for 3 nights running, and she did not send him away, and he did not come to the bed, and they did not speak of it during the day. It was a thing that existed inside the hours between 11 at night and 6 in the morning, and outside those hours it did not exist at all. And this was, she understood, an arrangement they were both going to honor for as long as they both needed it. On the 4th morning, she woke before dawn, and the chair was empty and the blanket was folded on its arm, and she understood without being told that they were finished with that particular chapter. He had decided on his own that she no longer needed him in the room. She was angry about it for perhaps 30 minutes, and then she realized that what she was actually angry about was that he had been right, because she had in fact slept through the night, and she had not had the dream. And her hands did not shake any more in the morning when she picked up her coffee cup, and something inside her had quietly mended a little, the way bones mend without telling anyone. It was around this time, in the weeks after the attack, when the house had settled into its new, closer shape, that she began to suspect she was pregnant. She did not tell anyone. Not at first. She sat with it for almost 2 weeks, watching her own body, watching the mornings, watching the way the smell of coffee had begun to do something small and off to her stomach that coffee had never done before. They had not many things, but they had not been nothing either. In the weeks after the attack, in the rooms between the rooms, in the long quiet evenings when the walls of the villa had gotten smaller and smaller. She was 19 years old, 20 now actually. Her birthday had passed 3 weeks ago without mention, because she had not wanted the mention, because a birthday had felt like a thing for another person, a person she had not been since the airport. She had become, by small degrees, a woman who let her husband hold her hand in the dark of a bedroom she had once tried to break out of. She had become, by smaller degrees, a woman who let him do other things. She had allowed herself those things by not thinking about them. Now, the thing that had come of not thinking about them was inside her, and there was no way, any longer, not to think. She bought a test in Florence on a Thursday. She went into the city with Julia for a lunch with Sofia Raguso. They had, improbably, become something like friends, Sofia and Lena, the kind of friends who made each other nervous and also made each other better. And after lunch, she slipped into a small pharmacy on a side street while Julia was looking at scarves across the piazza. And she paid in cash, and she tucked the small paper box into the bottom of her bag under a folded cardigan. She took it that night in her own bathroom, with the door locked, which was funny because no one in this house was going to come in without knocking anymore. No one, not even Marco, not once. She set the small plastic stick on the edge of the sink. She washed her hands while she waited. She looked at herself in the mirror. She did not look 19 anymore. She did not look 20. She did not know what she looked. She looked like a woman who had been on the edge of a bed holding a dead man's phone in her pocket. And she looked like a woman who had let her husband kiss her, for the first real time, in the doorway of his study, 3 weeks after that dead man, and who had kissed him back. She looked like the sum of every door she had walked through in this house. And the sum of every door was not the girl from Ohio anymore. And the girl from Ohio was not coming back. The girl from Ohio was in a photograph somewhere in an album in a house she would never see again. And Lena Valenti was here, in the mirror, pale and tired, and something else. Something that was not unhappy. The stick turned. She stared at it. She picked it up. She read the small paper insert that had come with the box to make sure. She read it twice. She set the stick down again. She sat down on the edge of the tub, and she put her hands over her mouth, and she did not know if she was laughing or crying or both. And it turned out, after a minute, that it was both. And that was all right, because this particular bathroom had heard a great many sounds from her over the last 6 months, and one more was not going to hurt it. She did not tell Marco that night. She told him the next morning on the terrace, with the sun just up and the coffee between them and his newspaper folded by his elbow. She told him in one sentence, without looking at him, because she did not know how to look at him while she said it. "I'm pregnant." He did not move. She waited. The bee was out already, working the lavender at the edge of the terrace. A cypress shadow lay across the flagstones. The world did not notice. "Lena, don't do the voice, Marco." "What voice?" "The careful voice. The don't break her voice." "I was not—" "Just say whatever you're going to say." He was quiet for a long time. "When?" "About 7 weeks." "You're certain?" "I took a test. I can go to a doctor. I wanted to tell you before I went to a doctor. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else." He set his cup down. His hand, she noticed, was not entirely steady. That was new. That was interesting. "Lena, look at me. Per favore." She looked at him. His face was doing the small crack again, the one she had seen twice now in her life, both times in this garden. A small fine break in the stone. But this time what showed through was not fear. This time it was something lighter, something older, something that looked for one moment like a boy. "You are all right," he said. "You are well." "I'm fine. I'm tired. I'm a little sick in the mornings. I'm okay." "A doctor, today. I will call." "Marco." "Yes." "Sit down. You're already sitting. Just sit. Stay. Don't make it a crisis. I'm not in a crisis. I'm telling you a piece of information, and I want to sit here with it, with you, for 5 minutes before you make it into phone calls. Can you give me 5 minutes?" He breathed out. He nodded. He reached across the small iron table, and he took her hand. They sat. 5 minutes. Longer. Then he said quietly, "There are things in my life that are going to change now. I know. I'm going to dismantle certain arrangements, certain businesses. I have been considering it for a year, for longer, since before you came. I did not have a reason then. I do now. Marco, don't make this child a reason. Don't put that on. I am not putting anything on anyone, Lena. I am telling you the truth. A man does not walk away from what I have built for no reason. He needs a reason. I have wanted to walk away for a long time. I did not have permission to, from myself, because the life was the only life I knew how to live. Now I have permission. From me. From you. From what is coming. From both. You do not have to accept the reason. You do not have to carry it. I am telling you what I intend. The intending is mine. She did not answer for a long time. She watched his face. She watched again the small silver at his temples, the small scar at his hairline, the plain ring on his right hand that had looked once like the mark of a man who had bought her, and that now looked like the mark of a man who was, slowly, beginning to return something he had taken. She put her other hand on top of his. "Okay," she said. "Okay. We'll figure it out. Yes. I want to tell someone about the baby. I don't know who. I don't have. You will tell Julia when you are ready, and Sophia, if you wish, and your own mother in your heart, if that is something you do. There is no rush, Kara. My father." He was quiet. "I don't want him to know. Then he will not know. I want that to be a thing I get to decide. You decide. Even if he comes, even if. You decide, Lena. In this, in everything from now on, you decide. Anything that touches your body, anything that touches your child, you decide. I swear this to you on everything I have, which is not much, but is more than a little." She looked at him. She had not, in any of the months she had known him, seen him swear anything. Men in his world, she had come to understand, did not swear lightly, because an oath made was a debt owed, and debts in his world were paid in coin that did not grow on trees. He had just promised her something he could not take back, and he had known it, and he had done it anyway. She nodded. She did not trust her voice. The bee moved from the lavender to the rosemary. The sun climbed. Somewhere inside the house, Julia was humming again. The same small tune she always hummed, the one Lena still did not know the name of. And the smell of bread was coming up from the kitchen, and the day was only beginning, and the child inside Lena was the size, according to the small paper insert, of a blueberry, and the man across the table from her was holding her hand as if it were made of glass. And the gate was still locked, and the wall around the garden was still high. But for the first time since she had arrived at this house, she was not thinking about the gate. She was thinking about what she was going to build inside it. What she built was not, at first, a grand thing. It was small. It was the kind of small that people underestimate, which was the only reason it was allowed to grow. In the weeks after the terrace conversation, Lena began going into Marco's study on Monday mornings without being asked. He did not stop her. He moved the second chair to the far side of his desk, the one the lawyer from Milan usually sat in when he came, and he let her sit there, and he let her listen. Men came from Naples. Men came from Palermo. Men came from a small, hard-faced town in Calabria she could not find on the map until Marco drew it for her on a napkin. They did not, at first, know what to do with her. They looked at Marco, and Marco said nothing, and they looked at Lena, and Lena said nothing, and after a while they went back to their meetings as if she were a vase on the sideboard, which was, she understood, exactly how she wanted to be looked at for now. She listened. She took no notes. She did not ask questions in the room. She asked them afterward, at dinner, when it was just her and Marco at the long dining table, and he would answer some of them, and he would say, "Not yet," Lena to some of them, and a very few he would say, "Never to." And those were the ones she remembered most clearly, because a man's never told you more about him than his yes ever did. Her belly grew, slowly at first. She was 20 years old, and she had never been pregnant before, and she had no mother to call, and she did not call Sophia Raguso about it because Sophia, for all her sharpness, did not have the gentler kind of patience that a pregnancy wants in a friend. She called, instead, Julia. Or rather, she allowed Julia, who did have that patience, and had been waiting for it to come to her. The old woman took over the small things without being asked. Ginger in the mornings for the sickness. A different pillow, firmer, brought up from a linen closet no one had opened in 30 years. A pair of slippers replaced without comment when Lena's feet began to swell. Julia did not say congratulations. She did not, in fact, say anything about the pregnancy at all for the first 2 months, because she came from a world in which one did not say a thing out loud until it was older than 3 months. And Lena, who came from a world that announced pregnancies in Instagram posts at 6 weeks, found herself grateful for the old superstition in a way she had not expected. The winter that year was a long one. It rained for weeks. The olive grove went silver and gray and quiet. Lena walked it every afternoon in Wellington boots and one of Marco's old wool coats that hung on her like a tent. And she listened to the rain hit the leaves, and she thought about many things, and she thought sometimes about Ohio. Her father sent a letter once, that winter. It came through the lawyer in Milan, Vittorio De Angelis, whose name she had learned to remember, exactly as Marco had told her she would. Vittorio brought the letter to the villa on a Wednesday in January, in a plain cream envelope, with a small note clipped to it explaining that he had intercepted it the previous week and had waited for a time when she was strong enough to read it, or to choose not to. Vittorio was a thin, courteous man in his 70s with eyes the color of shallow water and hands that shook very slightly when he set down his coffee. Lena liked him in a way she did not entirely trust. He was too nice to be only nice. She had learned, in the past year, to be suspicious of men who were only nice, because niceness in Marco's world was almost always a surface. She took the letter. She thanked him. She waited until he was gone. Then she sat with it for 3 days before she opened it. She read it in the library, in the chair where she had once dropped a book when the first shot had sounded. She had kept the chair. She had not moved it. She was a little superstitious about it now. The letter was short. Her father was in Lisbon, it said. He was working. He was sober, he said, though she did not believe him, because he had said he was sober the last 6 times he had said it, and he had always been lying. He had heard, through someone, that she was going to have a child. He wanted her to know that he was happy for her, he said. He wanted her to know that he had never meant for any of it to happen the way it had happened. He was her father, he said. He would always be her father. She read the letter twice. Then she folded it back up and put it in its envelope and sat for a long time with her hand on her belly, which was, by then, round and obvious, a thing she could not hide even in Marco's coat. And she thought about the man who had written the letter and the man who had walked her off the plane in Florence, and she tried to decide if they were the same man. They were. That was the hard part. They were the same man, and he had always been the same man, and he had always been a man who was going to trade her away someday for something he thought he needed more than her. And the only mercy in her life was that he had traded her to someone who had turned out, in spite of himself, to be better than he was. She wrote him back. She took 2 days to write it, not because it was long, because it was hard. What she wrote, in the end, was 3 short paragraphs. "Dad," she wrote, "I got your letter. I'm glad you're working. I hope you're sober. I hope you stay sober. I'm not going to write to you after this. You are not going to meet this baby. I want you to understand that it is not a punishment. It is a decision. I made it for the same reason Mom used to hide the checkbook. You are not a safe person for people who love you. And I have somebody now who is going to love me, and I am going to love her back. And I am not going to put her in the same room with the person who put me on that plane. If you ever need to know that I am alive, Vittorio will tell you that much. He will not tell you where. He will not pass messages. Please don't ask him to. I am not angry anymore. That is the part I want you to know. I am not angry because being angry at you would mean still carrying you, and I am putting you down now. I hope you find a way to put yourself down too, someday, somewhere soft. Goodbye, Dad. Lena. She sealed it. She gave it to Vittorio on his next visit. He took it without a word. She never heard from her father again. She did not know later whether he had received the letter, or whether he had read it, or whether he had been sober when he read it, and she decided, in stages over several years, that it did not matter. She had said the true thing to him. The thing he did with it was his. Their daughter was born on a Tuesday in April. Lena did not at the time appreciate the irony that it was a Tuesday, which had been for some time the day of the week she was most careful to watch. The labor was long and difficult. 26 hours, the doctor in Florence said afterward, which was not unusual for a first child, though Lena thought the doctor was underselling it. She remembered Marco's face at the edge of the bed, white and still and more afraid than she had ever seen him, more afraid even than in the shed, and she remembered Julia's hand on her forehead. And she remembered the moment, very late in the second night, when she had been certain she was not going to survive, and had said so out loud, and Marco had leaned down very close to her ear and said, "Lena, listen to me. You are going to. You are going to, because I am telling you, because I require it." And she had laughed, actually laughed through the pain, because only Marco Valenti would try to order a woman in labor to stay alive, and somehow the laughing had given her enough breath for the next contraction, and then the one after that. The baby came just before dawn. A girl. 7 pounds and change, a head full of dark hair that would later go lighter, a cry that took 10 seconds too long to start and then would not stop for an hour. They named her Elena, after Lena's mother, who was not there to see her, which was, Lena thought, in the quiet of the first hour when the baby had finally fallen asleep on her chest, probably the largest loss she had carried into this room. Her mother should have seen this child. Her mother would have been insufferable about it, in the best way. Her mother would have cried, and then pretended she had not been crying, and then cried again while pretending she had allergies. Marco sat beside the bed for the rest of that morning. He did not sleep. He did not put the baby down once she was placed in his arms. He held her the way Lena had never seen him hold anything in his life, with a kind of careful astonishment, as if he had been told the thing in his hands was his, and he had not yet decided whether to believe it. When the baby's small hand came out of the blanket and latched onto the tip of his finger, Marco looked at Lena, and his face did something it had not done before, and Lena understood, very quietly, that she had finally watched a wall come down in her husband that had been standing there longer than she had been alive. "Hello," he whispered to his daughter, in English, which was strange because he almost never spoke English to anyone but Lena. "Hello. Hello, Bambina." Lena watched him. She did not say anything. Some moments you did not speak into. The dismantling had begun months before Elena was born. By the time the baby was 6 months old, it was well underway, and by the time she was a year, it was, in the ways that mattered, mostly done. Marco did not talk to Lena about all of it. She did not ask him to. What she understood was this: he had inherited a thing from his father, and his father from his father. A set of arrangements in a set of ports and a set of cities. And some of those arrangements were the sort of thing that could be sold to legitimate companies at a discount, and some were the sort of thing that had to be ended, and some were the sort of thing that had to be ended in a particular way, by a particular hand, so that the ending did not open a door through which worse men walked in. He spent a year and a half doing this. He traveled more than she would have liked. He came home tired in a way she had not seen him tired before. A deep, in-the-bones tired that no amount of sleep seemed to touch. He lost weight. He went gray faster at the temples than he had before. She did not nag him about any of it, because she understood that what he was doing, in part, for her. And a woman did not nag a man out of a thing he was paying for in his own body on her account. What she did instead was learn. She learned Italian to the point that she dreamed in it. She learned French to the point that she could disagree in it, which Signora Conti said was the highest level any foreign speaker ever reached. She learned the names of the families, not only the Russos and the other old houses Marco had come up with, but the newer houses, the legitimate ones, the businessmen and the bankers and the mayors and the cardinals, a whole other world of money and influence that ran parallel to the one she had married into, and that Marco, quietly and over years, was moving his family toward. She learned how to read a balance sheet because Vittorio taught her. She learned how to host a dinner of 34 people without a single seating mistake, because Sofia Raguso taught her, and Sofia had a memory for slights like a ledger. She learned how to hold a baby on her hip and conduct a phone conversation in Italian with the prefect of a Tuscan province about the repair of a municipal road that Marco's family had paid for since 1891. Because no one taught her that, she worked it out. She did not become a version of Sofia. That had been one of her private fears in the first year. That this house would shape her the way it had shaped other women it had taken in, into a beautiful, glittering, sharp-edged thing, bored and cruel. She watched instead for the places where the shaping tried to happen, and she held herself apart from them. She did not snap at the staff. She did not treat Julia, as she aged and slowed the way some women in that world treated aging servants. When Julia finally retired to a small apartment in town at the age of 71, Lena bought the apartment outright in Julia's name and told no one, including Marco, until Marco noticed the transfer in the household accounts 6 months later and looked at her across the breakfast table with an expression that was 2 parts amusement and 1 part something deeper, and said only, "You did not need to use our money for that, Lena. You could have used mine." "It was mine," Lena said. "Everything here is yours. That is not the point. It was a thing I wanted to do with my own hand. If you had done it, she would have said thank you to you. I wanted her to say thank you to me." He considered her for a moment. Then he tilted his head, the small tilt she remembered from the first day on the terrace, the tilt he did when she had surprised him. And he picked up his espresso, and he said, "Then you are right, and I am wrong. And Julia has the better landlady." That was in the 3rd year. Oh, their son was born in the 4th. His name was Tommaso, after Marco's grandfather, and he came easier than his sister had, and he was, from the first week, a quieter baby than Elena had been. Where Elena had been a creature of opinions, she had had opinions about temperatures and textures and which breast and at what hour, since roughly the age of 4 days. Tommaso was a watcher. He looked at people. He looked at them long and carefully and did not decide anything in a hurry. Lena, holding him on the terrace where she had once sat alone across from a man she did not yet know, thought he had Marco's eyes, in the deeper sense of the word eyes. She thought he was going to be someday the sort of boy whom other boys quieted down around, without knowing why. Marco was different this time. He had been shocked into love by the first child. With the second, he was not shocked. He was ready. He was better. He held Tommaso in the afternoon while Lena slept, and he walked the boy up and down the long hall with the oil paintings, and Lena heard him, some evenings, telling the baby the names of the paintings one by one. The man on the horse, the Pope, the hunting dog. The way his own father, she gathered, had once told him. She had by then met Marco's father's grave. He had taken her there on a Sunday, in the 3rd year, at her request. It was in a small chapel on a hill above a village neither of them ever named aloud. The stone was black granite with a single name and 2 dates and no other word. Marco had stood a long time in front of it and had said nothing, and Lena had held his hand, and eventually he had said, in English, very quietly, "He would not have liked you, Lena," and Lena had said, "I don't care." And Marco had laughed, a real laugh, in the cold stone chapel, and had bent his head, briefly, to her shoulder. "He would not have liked you," Marco had repeated, "and that is why I know, Cara, that I am doing a different thing with my life than he did with his. It is the good measure." That was the sort of sentence she remembered later. The sort of sentence that, in the hundreds of quiet hours of the years that followed, she came back to when she was trying to work out who her husband was, and who she was, and what exactly the two of them had built together out of a thing that had started, let no one forget, as a bill of sale. Because she never forgot. That was the private vow she had made to herself at the dinner at Sophia's house, leaning against the tall window with the wine in her hand, and she kept it. Not bitterly, not as a grudge, as a fact the way Marco had taught her to hold facts, as something you did not hide from, because hiding from a fact was how a fact killed you. She remembered the plane. She remembered her father's hand letting go of hers. She remembered the lock clicking on the bedroom door on her first night in the villa. She remembered the man coming down the cellar stairs, and she remembered the weight of the pistol, and she remembered the taste of the Amaro on the day she had signed her name on a paper that had not been a choice. She remembered, and in the remembering she held on to something important. The small, clear knowledge that she had not, in fact, been saved by anyone. She had been taken, and then she had been given an opportunity to survive the taking, and she had done the surviving with her own hands, in her own way, on her own time. Marco had provided the conditions. Marco had not provided the survival. Marco, to his enormous credit, understood this about her, and never once in the years that followed did he try to tell her otherwise. It was a distinction that mattered. It was, in the end, the distinction that let her love him. She realized she loved him on a Thursday, not a Tuesday. She had, by then, broken the spell of Tuesdays 100 small times and did not pay attention to them anymore. It was a Thursday in the 7th year. She was 26 years old, and Elena was 6 and Tommaso was 3, and she was standing in the doorway of the smaller sitting room, watching Marco on the floor with both children. He was wearing an old sweater and his hair was rumpled, and Elena was trying to braid it badly with her small, insistent fingers, and Tommaso was sitting on his father's leg with a wooden toy in his mouth, and Marco was telling them a story in Italian about a fish who did not want to be a fish and wanted to be a bird, and learned over many adventures that being a fish was, in fact, a good thing to be. His voice was low and patient, and had in it a happiness she had not heard in him during the first year or the second or even the third. It had come in gradually, the way certain kinds of light come in gradually across the course of an afternoon that you do not realize is the longest afternoon of the year until the sun finally drops. She stood in the doorway, and she watched him, and she thought, oh, there it is. That's what that is. She did not say it that day. She was superstitious about it, the way Julia had been superstitious about announcing Lena's pregnancy. Some things were easier to kill by naming than to keep by holding quiet. She said it, instead, 2 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon in the garden, on the same stone bench where, in the first month, she had cried for 30 minutes without making a sound. The children were asleep. The sun was low. Marco was sitting beside her with a book in his lap that he had been reading and had set down. Marco. I love you. He was very still for a moment. I know, he said. You know. I have known for a little while, Kara. It is not a secret thing, love. It shows on the face. Then why didn't you say anything? Because you had not said it yet. That's very old-fashioned of you. I am a very old-fashioned man. You should have said something. I've been carrying it around for weeks. He turned, then, and he looked at her. His face had aged in the years she had known it. There were lines at the corners of his eyes now that had not been there in the study the first afternoon, and the gray at his temples had crept back further into his hair. But the eyes were the same. The patient, considering eyes. The eyes that on her first morning on the terrace had appraised her like a man appraises a thing delivered to his door, and that, somewhere in the years between, had stopped doing that and had started doing a different thing, a thing she could not name but recognized on sight. Lena, he said, do you remember, in the first year, what I told you about the day you forget? You said the day I forget is the day you lose whatever I am becoming. Yes, I have not forgotten. I know. I am never going to. I know, Kara, that is the only reason I am able to love you back. She leaned her head on his shoulder. She felt the small, steady rise and fall of his breathing. She felt, somewhere on the other side of the villa wall, the low hum of the life they had made, the children asleep, the kitchen preparing the evening meal, the gardener mending a trellis, Julia's replacement, a woman named Lucia who had been with them now for 3 years, sitting in her small chair by the kitchen door with a rosary between her fingers, and the same tired, kind eyes that Julia had once had. None of it was perfect. That was the thing she wanted, later, when she was a much older woman, to have on record somewhere. Not in a book, not in a speech, but somewhere in the bones of the story, so that if anyone ever repeated this back to her daughter or her granddaughter, they would repeat this part too. It was not perfect. There were fights. There were silences that lasted days. There were nights when the nightmare still came, not often, by the 7th year, but it came. And she woke up in the dark, with her hand reaching for a pistol that was no longer kept in the bedside drawer, and Marco would wake up with her and hold her, and they would not speak until morning. There were meetings he still went to that she did not ask about, because some parts of the old life had to be ended slowly, over years, or they did not end at all. There was a morning in the 9th year when a car did not arrive when it was supposed to, and for 20 minutes Lena sat in the kitchen with Lucia and held Lucia's hand, and they both looked at the clock. And when Marco's car finally came up the drive, Lena walked out to meet him and did not say a word, and he did not say a word, and they simply held each other, standing on the gravel, for a long time. And that was a kind of marriage too. There was her father, who died in the 11th year, in Porto, alone, of something that had probably been alcohol, but that the Portuguese death certificate politely listed as cardiac. Vittorio brought her the news. She cried for an afternoon, and then she did not cry about him again. She had, as she had told him in the letter, put him down years before. What she grieved, she understood, was not the man. It was the father she had wanted him to be when she was 6. That child was the one she mourned, not the man in Porto. and the morning was quick because she had already done most of it over 20 years of Sundays. There was Julia, who died in the 13th year, peacefully, in the apartment Lena had bought her, with a nurse Lena had hired holding her hand and Lena herself on the other side of the bed. Julia had looked at her, near the end, and had said Signora with a small wrinkled smile, the way she had said it the first night in the villa. Lena had said, "Signora yourself, you old woman." And Julia had closed her eyes and gone to sleep, and not woken up. And Lena had cried harder at that bedside than she had cried at her father's news, and she was not ashamed of that. Love, she had come to understand, was not a thing that always ran along the lines of blood. Love was a thing that ran where you let it run. Bye. 12 years after the plane, Lena stood on the terrace in a dark green dress that was not quite the dress from the Raguso dinner, but was close enough to be a quiet private joke, and she watched her daughter, 13 now, tall for her age, with Marco's eyes and Lena's mouth, argue in rapid Italian with one of the kitchen staff about the placement of the flowers for the evening's party. Tommaso was on the far side of the terrace with his father, both of them bent over something on a phone, Marco's hand resting easily on the boy's shoulder. The party that night was for her, 32 years old. She had not wanted a party. Marco had insisted. Elena, hearing of the insistence, had taken Marco's side with the unflinching loyalty of an oldest daughter who had already, at 13, learned how to orchestrate her parents into the shapes she wanted them in. And so there was a party. Sofia Raguso came early, as she always did. Matteo had died 2 years before. The heart, in his case, as the heart in men like Matteo always eventually was. And Sofia had surprised everyone, including herself, by becoming an unexpectedly formidable widow, running Matteo's old legitimate businesses with a tighter hand than he ever had. She came up the terrace steps in a black suit with diamonds at her ears, and she looked Lena up and down and said, in English, "You look tired. You look happy. I do not approve of either of these things, but I will allow them for one evening." Hello, Sophia. Hello, little American. Come, kiss me. I will pretend to be bored. It is my only entertainment. Lena kissed her on both cheeks. Sophia held her shoulders a second longer than strictly necessary, and her eyes, which had once, a very long time ago, measured Lena like a fabric to be priced, were soft for one short beat before she covered it. 32, Sophia said. Dio. When I was 32, I did not have 2 children and a terrace and a husband who loved me. I had a husband. They are not the same thing. I'm sorry, Sophia. Do not be sorry. Sorrow is for women who have not figured out how to be useful. I am very useful. Come, tell me about Elena's school. I need an enemy to sharpen myself on, and the stupid headmistress will not answer my letters. Lena laughed. She walked with Sophia to the small group near the fountain. She poured wine. She greeted Vittorio, who was 78 now and needed a cane, and who had brought as his date a quiet Milanese widow named Teresa, who had clearly, in the previous year, become important to him in a way he did not yet know how to speak about. She greeted Dario, who at 54 had gone thick in the shoulders, but was still the only man in the room, other than Marco, who made the younger men quiet down when he entered. He kissed her hand, as he always did at these parties, and he said, "Signora," as he always did. And she said, "Stop calling me that, Dario. We have known each other for 13 years. And he said, "I will stop calling you that, Signora, when you are dead." And they both laughed, because it was the same joke they had been making for 10 years, and neither of them were ever going to get tired of it. Marco crossed the terrace to her. He put a hand on the small of her back. He kissed the side of her temple briefly, the way he always did in public, not more. He did not believe in more in public. A man of his generation, a man of his world. And he handed her a small glass of the Amaro that they had drunk on their wedding day. They always drank it now, on her birthday. It was a joke between them, a dark one in the beginning. By this year, it had become a simple one, which was, she understood, the right arc for a joke between a husband and a wife, if you were lucky. "Salute," he said. "Salute, caro." They touched glasses. Across the terrace, Elena had given up on the flowers and was laughing with her brother. Tommaso was mimicking something, probably a teacher, and Elena was laughing hard enough that she had to sit down, and the sound of it carried across the stone and the old pots and the lavender, and Lena heard it, and she thought, I was 19 years old. I got on a plane. A man handed me to another man like I was a thing to be handed. I thought my life was ending. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my days in a room with a door that locked from the outside. I was wrong about the ending. I was wrong about the room. I was wrong about almost everything I thought that first day, except one thing. I was right that the girl who got off that plane did not come out of the house alive. She didn't. She's not in this dress. She's not drinking this Amaro. She's not the mother of those 2 children on the other side of the terrace. She died somewhere in the first month, probably in the garden, probably on that stone bench. And I've been a different woman ever since. But the different woman got to choose what she became. That's the part I didn't know when I was 19. I didn't know that the dying was not the ending. I didn't know that on the other side of the dying, there was a door you had to open with your own hand, a door nobody could open for you, not even a man who loved you, not even a man who had all the money in Italy. I didn't know that a cage is only a cage if you stay the same person inside it, and that if you let yourself change, if you let yourself learn and watch and listen and hurt and heal and kill when you have to, and love when you are ready, the walls start to mean something different. That's what he told me the first week on that terrace. I didn't believe him. He was right. I hate a little bit that he was right, but he was. I was claimed. I don't forget that. I'll never forget that. I don't let my daughter forget that either. When she's old enough to understand it without being scared by it, I'm going to tell her the whole thing. Every piece. The plane, the lock, the cellar, the letter from Porto. I'm going to tell her that her mother was bought and sold at 19, and that her mother built a life anyway, and that the life was a good one, not because the buying was forgiven, but because the built was real. I want her to know the difference, because the world is going to try to sell her things too someday. Different things, cheaper things. The world is always selling women something. I want her to know that surviving a bad deal is not the same as pretending it was a good one. I want her to know that you can make a whole life inside a wall somebody else built, as long as you never forget who built it, and as long as you, by the end, have built enough of your own walls to put the first one in perspective. I was claimed. And then I chose. That's the whole story. She took a sip of the Amaro. It burned going down, the way it always had. She smiled, a small private smile that was not for Marco or Sophia or any of the guests, only for herself. And she turned to watch her children at the far end of the terrace, and the light of the low sun came in through the cypress trees and struck the old stone of the villa. And somewhere in the kitchen, Lucia was humming a small tune that sounded, in the drifting of it, like the one Julia used to hum, though Lena could not be sure, because Lucia had never known Julia. And the tune might just have been the tune that women in this valley had been humming for 100 years, passing it from kitchen to kitchen without knowing where it had come from. Marco's hand found hers. He did not look at her. He did not have to. She squeezed his fingers once and let go. Elena ran across the terrace toward her with both hands full of stolen grapes. A 13-year-old with her grandmother's name and her mother's stubborn chin and her father's careful eyes. And she was laughing. And she was free. And she was, in every sense that mattered, the answer to a question that a 19-year-old girl had asked a long time ago on a cold marble floor in a locked bedroom she could not, at the time, imagine ever leaving. The answer was yes. You can build a life. You can build a whole life. You can build it with your own hands, even inside someone else's walls, if you live long enough and choose well enough and refuse, through every season, to lie to yourself about where you started. Lena opened her arms. Her daughter ran into them. The evening went on.